So, welcome to Step 1000, a guide designed to help you prepare for Step 1 in the most efficient, effective, and sustainable way possible. My journey through medical school and Step 1 was filled with a lot of struggles and failures, and eventually I found my success. But this guide is not only based on my personal experience of studying for 14 months and taking the exam twice, which really sucked, but it's also about looking at key strategies that help me finally pass with confidence. When I tell you that the first time I took the exam, the mess sucked. I was not ready for it, and I thought I was, but it goes to the many of the problems that many people are facing right now. But when I took it the second time, it was by far one of the easiest exams, surprisingly, and that was because I prepared well for it. I prepared specifically for that exam that I was taking. And this whole series is centered around creating relevant and relatable and, for the most part, like contemporary approaches that can help you take the exam for the year that you're taking it in. And that's one of the big things, right? So with that, Step 1000 is about more than just passing the exam. It's about learning how to study smarter, stay mentally and physically healthy, and keep anxieties and burnout at bay. That's the big part, right? So Dedicated is about investing in yourself for the betterment of your future. And so we want to be intentional and we want to get yourself, to 1,000, right? So Step 1000 is about getting you to 1,000. And if you can walk into the exam at 1,000, I have full confidence that you will do well on this exam. And so you may be thinking, like, who is this guy, right? So my name is Steve. I'm a MD PhD student at the University of Nevada, Reno. I am currently halfway through medical school. I took Step 1 and passed it. And now I'm currently working on my PhD in integrative neuroscience. And my research is focused on how emerging technology, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, all that stuff can be used to improve health literacy and education. And so big picture, my research focuses on how technology can essentially be used within human optimization. And it's it's a really crazy experience to be doing that. But I think one of the things, being a neuroscientist right now, it allows me to really explore a lot of the things related to education and learning styles that I could help benefit you all in your Step 1 journey. For the most part, my journey to medicine wasn't always my first path, but life has always given me a direction that I can follow and eventually find true belonging with. So my journey into medicine began with a dream of just playing professional football. I played Division I football at the University of Hawaii and at Oregon State, where I faced a lot of highs in my athletic success and also a lot of lows with injuries and recovery. I had 2 hip reconstructive surgeries, and from there, I ended up having a football career that ended after 6 years of NCAA. I wasn't able to make it to the pros because it's just really hard to come back from multiple surgeries and stuff. And so just the turnover wasn't that great. And, injuries and your age and everything kind of catches up to you, especially when you're competing against people that haven't had the injuries that you had. And so it was a tough pill to swallow. And I found myself in a crossroads. I trying to figure out what my next chapter would be. During this time, I was able to explore creative passions, becoming a newspaper cartoonist, starting a freelance career as an animation and comic artist. And the difficult part for me was reckoning with the fact that I never got the opportunity to realize my dream as becoming a professional athlete, because I played football for 12 years and I wasn't able to cash in that check. But I couldn't ignore my call to medicine. I earned a bachelor's in psychology, earned a master's in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on fine arts, exercise sports science, and sports psychology. And I went through a long, grueling process of applying to medical schools multiple times. After 2 rounds of the MCAT, I took the MCAT twice too, over 70 applications, countless heartbreaks and rejections, and 7 years of just adversity and just grit my teeth, and also $11,000 investment I finally got my acceptance letter to my first medical school. I ended up getting another one after that. Also, a couple more rejections, but the journey just wasn't easy. But it really prepared me for the road ahead in medical school in the truest sense possible. Once in medical school, I realized the real challenge had only just begun, to be honest with you. I struggled my first 2 years, remediating a couple of blocks, grappling with, a system of education that didn't really align with how I learned best. And I found that the resources that we were given, PowerPoints, lectures, textbooks, it just didn't translate to the success on my exams that I thought it would. The real challenge wasn't just learning medicine, it was about how to take a test. And I found that that was the determining factor for success in medical school. It wasn't the passion. It wasn't, why medicine. It was how well do you do on a test, whether you like it or not. It was during Dedicated for Step 1 that these challenges really came into sharp focus because it was the only show in town. It's the only thing you had to do and the only thing you could do. I studied for months, doing thousands of UWorld questions, memorizing countless Anki cards from the Anki decks and stuff, and immersing myself in third-party resources as much as I possibly could. Yet, when I took Step the first time, I failed the mess out of it. And part of it was because I felt like the test that I took was the cousin of the test that I was actually studying for. And honestly, it felt like a gut punch from Mike Tyson. Like Mike Tyson in his prime, not Jake Paul Mike Tyson. But it also sparked a realization that I wasn't failing because I didn't know the material. I was failing because I wasn't studying efficiently and I wasn't preparing for the test that I was being tested on, right? And so for me, it was just I was preparing for the wrong kind of exam. And that's not enough a reflection of me. That's just a systemic issue because if you talk to other people, that took the exam and also that are studying for the exam now, and I guess it's pass fail, but it's kind of the same thing. And so that's where I kind of had this idea for Step 1000. And, over time, I created something. And so Step 1000 isn't just another study guide. It's a roadmap for how to navigate the maze of Step 1 preparation in a way that promotes repetition, consistency, and sustainability. It's about learning how to take the exam, not just about memorizing the facts. It's a method I developed after reflecting on my own struggles and eventually having success by passing Step 1 on my second attempt. I didn't develop this in a vacuum, though. It was made through a lengthy process of using anything and everything I could get my hands on and eventually trimming down the fat from the BS. I wanted to create a resource that gives students a clear direction and actionable strategies to improve without falling into traps that so many of us encounter during this dedicated period, especially me. This guide is built on my experience of taking Step 1 twice, of remediating multiple blocks in medical school, and learning how to develop a process that actually worked for me. Through structured advice, study plans, and targeted strategies, Step 1 will help you study smarter, not harder, so that you can pass Step 1 without burning out. And so, without further ado, welcome to Step 1000, and let's just get started. So let me introduce you to the Step 1000 team. As you embark on your Step 1 journey to conquer Step 1, you'll be guided by a unique and supportive team who bring a balance of knowledge, strategy, and humor to your study experience. Each member has their own style, but together, they create the perfect blend of depth, efficiency, and levity to help you stay focused and confident. So me, Stephen Christian, is the visionary behind Eyeland Fever and Step 1000. I was a comic book writer, illustrator, and I'm currently an MD PhD student that seamlessly integrates my love for storytelling with the extensive medical knowledge to create engaging educational resources that truly resonate with students. As the founder of Iltopia Studios, I leverage cutting-edge technology like augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence to craft immersive narratives that highlight the Black experience in America. My journey into medicine was far from conventional. where I started off as a Division I college football player, later transitioning to a career as a freelance artist and animator before pursuing medicine. Resilience in overcoming numerous challenges is key, especially for me, including my battle with Step 1. This motivated me to develop Step 1000 as a guide to help other students bypass the pitfalls that I encountered, offering a sustainable and effective approach to exam preparation. At the forefront of Step 1000, I draw on my diverse experiences and skills to ensure that students have the tools they need to excel without failing and without burning out. So, hey, then we have my guy, Roscoe. Roscoe Thomason is the no-nonsense, efficiency-driven character in the Eyeland Fever's universe, known for cutting through the noise and focusing on action. Where others may get lost in the details, Roscoe excels at simplifying complex issues, distilling them down to their essential components. He's sharp, fast, and results-oriented, always opting for the most direct path to solving a problem. In a sense, Roscoe is the group's spark notes. He trims the fat, skips the fluff, and delivers only the most crucial information. In Step 1000, Roscoe plays the role of your high-yield guru, dedicated to giving you the most critical points for Step 1, without any unnecessary detours. His straightforward, no-frills style ensures that you get what you need quickly, making him the perfect companion when you're short on time or overwhelmed by the sheer volume of material. Roscoe's signature, too long, didn't read, trimming the fat sections, are designed to deliver essential strategies and key takeaways, keeping you on track without wasting a second. He's your go-to source for concise, high-impact advice that gets straight to the point. TJ Jenkins is the thoughtful, detail-oriented character in Eyeland Fever, with a deep passion for knowledge and thoroughness. TJ is one who dives headfirst into every situation, determined to understand every facet of a problem, no matter how complex. Known as the encyclopedia of the group, TJ provides detailed explanations, backgrounds, and context, often giving more information than you might expect, but always ensuring that you're fully equipped to make sense of every detail. His love for getting into the weeds of any issue means that he won't stop until every angle is covered, ensuring nothing important is left out. In Step 1000, TJ takes on the role of your comprehensive guide. If Roscoe is the spark notes, TJ is the encyclopedia. He provides deep dives into every aspect of Step 1000 by preparing you for Step 1, from content review to test-taking strategies. His goal is to give you a complete picture of what you need to know, making sure you don't miss any important details. TJ's love for storytelling helps break down complex subjects, giving you both the what and the why behind each topic, whether it's the finer points of biochemistry or the reasoning behind a study method. TJ is there to ensure you understand not just the content, but the context that will serve you well on your exam day. So here we go, Nimbus. Nimbus is Roscoe's loyal and lovable stuffed animal sidekick, always ready to jump into action when things get too tense. It's fluffy, adventurous, and full of charm. Nimbus has a knack for showing up when you just need a breather from intense study sessions. While Roscoe dives deep into high-yield content and delivers no-nonsense advice, Nimbus provides perfect counterbalance with a playful, carefree spirit. He's not an expert in pharmacology or biostatistics, but he excels in lightening the mood and reminding you to take a moment to relax when the pressure builds. Nimbus's spontaneous appearances bring much needed joy and humor to the grind of Step 1 preparation. His fun-loving personality is the perfect antidote to Roscoe's focused approach, offering a gentle reminder that it's okay to step back and enjoy a little fun along the way. Whether you're knee deep in study material or just feeling the weight of stress during the exam, you can always count on Nimbus to ease the tension and make your journey a little more enjoyable. With Steven's personal insights, Roscoe's no-nonsense summaries, TJ's in-depth exploration, and Nimbus's lightheartedness, this team is here to guide you through every step of your Step 1 preparation. Whether you need clear, focused strategies or well-timed reminder to smile and relax, this team has your back as you work towards passing this exam. So how can TJ and Roscoe help you succeed on Step 1? So through Step 1000, TJ and Roscoe are here to serve as your study guides, each offering a different approach to mastering the material. TJ is the storytelling element, providing you with comprehensive explanations and helping you fully understand the content and strategies that will lead to success. He's all about making sure that you have every tool at your disposal and aren't left wondering why something works the way it does. Whether it's the deep reasonings behind study schedules or the science behind how a question is structured, TJ ensures you're equipped with the full context. On the other hand, Roscoe knows that you don't always have time to sift through every single detail. That's where he shines. With Roscoe, you get the distilled version of everything you need to know. His sections are concise and focused on high-yield content, helping you zero in on the material that most likely will appear on your exam. If TJ is there to help you see the full landscape, Roscoe ensures that you don't miss the landmarks along the way. Together, TJ and Roscoe create a balanced approach that caters to both in-depth learners and those who will thrive on efficiency. As you navigate this guide, you can rely on TJ when you want to fully immerse yourself in the content and strategy, and you could turn to Roscoe when you need to cut through the clutter and get straight to the point. Their dynamic partnership will help you ensure that you have the full spectrum of tools needed to pass Step 1 with confidence. Whether you prefer the deep dives or the quick hits, TJ and Roscoe have you covered. So the structure of each chapter is as such. Each chapter is crafted with a clear intention to help you maximize the resources you already have without overwhelming you with even more. My goal is to guide you in using what's available to you more effectively, rather than drowning in an endless pile of new study tools. Here's how each chapter is laid out. First, I provide an overview of the chapter's theme, setting the stage for what we'll focus on. Then, I'll share a personal story of my own struggles on this journey, the stuff that I learned and how I navigated through it to overcome those challenges. After that, I offer insights on how I applied these lessons to my own study process so you can see how to do the same in yours. Then we'll give you a breather. There's a lighthearted moment with Nimbus and the gang where you'll get a chance to pause and reflect and just enjoy a little laugh. And then finally, we'll hit the trimming the fat section, which focuses on the must-know, high-yield information that you can directly apply to your Step 1 preparation. Brought to you by Roscoe, of course. This structure is designed to keep things practical, relatable, and fun, while making sure that you stay focused on what matters most in your journey, which is preparing efficiently and studying and passing. Okay, Chapter 1, The Problem with Medical Education. In this chapter, I will share my personal path to medical school, from playing football in college and undergoing multiple hip surgeries to becoming a freelance artist and eventually applying to medical school. This chapter highlights the many twists and turns I took before reaching my goal. I also discussed the challenges I faced while applying to medical school, including multiple rejections and how I finally found success. In this chapter, you could expect an honest account of my non-traditional journey into medicine, as well as hurdles I faced and the persistence that was required for me to overcome them. Also, insights into how those experiences shaped my approach to Step 1 preparation. And so in general, medical school is an intense experience that demands an enormous amount of information be learned in a short period of time. But what many of us don't realize until we're in the deep process that is what we're taught in medical school doesn't always prepare us for the reality of standardized board exams like Step 1. In my first 2 years of medical school, I struggled, mainly to grasp the concepts being thrown at me. Not because I wasn't interested in the material, but because the educational resources didn't align with how we were used to being tested and how I was taught. For the most part, medical school is a blur of PowerPoints, lectures, dense textbooks, and we sit in class, we take notes, and we try to absorb as much information as possible. But when it comes to time to actually do an exam, especially something like STEP or retired board exam questions like the CBSE or CAS, we're faced with a different challenge altogether. Step 1 doesn't just test your knowledge, it tests your ability to apply that knowledge in a highly specific, time-pressurized way. This disconnect between learning the material and being able to use it on exams is one of the biggest hurdles that medical students often face, and I am definitely one of those. So, reasons why I struggled. Like many of you, I was deeply invested in learning about the human body and medicine, and I wanted to understand the mechanisms of disease, the intricacies of pharmacology, and the physiology behind each system. But when I sat down to study for Step 1, I quickly realized that the knowledge I had built wasn't enough. It had become much of a task to just become a better test taker, not just a better student of medicine. This realization was really frustrating. I felt like I spent most of my time just learning how to pass a test than to become actually a better doctor. The resources provided to me by my medical school were helpful in the classroom, but there was a disconnect from the format of Step 1. I was handed PowerPoint presentations and lecture notes that were structured in a way that didn't overlap with what I would see in a multiple choice question. And the concepts, that I was being taught were relevant, but the way that they were presented didn't translate to me actually getting the questions right on my exam. Step 1 doesn't really care how well you can recite lectures or how much of first aid you've memorized. It tests your ability to recognize patterns, think critically under pressure, and apply knowledge to unfamiliar situations. The exam forces you to connect the dots between abstract principles and real-world applications, something that can't be achieved through rote memorization alone. You have to know how to apply it, and you also have to know how to study appropriately for it. It's all about the preparation. In medical school, we're often taught to focus on breadth. The board exam doesn't reward breadth. It rewards depth and precision. It tests your ability to pick out the most important details from a flood of information and make quick, accurate decisions. We have Roscoe here. He's jumping up for joy because he loves science. But the USMLE has other plans. And they're like, you got to get through me first. And obviously, that's not what Roscoe signed up for. And it's going to be a challenge. But Roscoe can do it, and so can you. During my dedicated Step 1 preparation, I found that much of what I had spent my first 2 years learning wasn't directly useful for the exam. Sure, it gave me a foundation, but when it came to answering the kinds of questions Step 1 presented, I felt lost. Like, it was crazy. The PowerPoints and the lecture notes I had relied on were too broad and too superficial for the level of understanding required on the exam. I needed to relearn how to actually study. And often it feels like a crossroads between wanting to study and devote your time to passing Step 1 and actually becoming a doctor. And there's some overlap, but there's some clear deviations between what you need for an actual board exam to become a doctor and what you actually need in the clinic to actually become a doctor. And you often have to reckon with that reality very quickly, or else you'll get lost and consumed. That's when I realized that the problem wasn't really me, it was the system. Medical education is designed to make us absorb information quickly, but it doesn't teach us how to apply this information in a high-pressure situation for a test. The resources we're given don't necessarily align with the skills we need to pass step 1. That's an issue. We're left to fend for ourselves, piecing together a study strategy from whatever third-party resources we can find, hoping that we'll eventually have enough to carry us over across the finish line. And that's very much a gamble. Kind of sucks. The real eye-opener for me came when I started to focus less on the content and more on the process of test taking. I had to shift my mindset. Step 1 wasn't about mastering medicine. It was about mastering the art of standardized testing. This was a hard pill to swallow because I went into medical school wanting to learn how to treat patients, not how to navigate multiple choice exams. But the truth is, if you want to pass step 1, you have to prioritize becoming a better test taker over becoming a master of medical content. And so think about it this way. You have your didactic, which is the first 2 years of medical school, or if you are one of the unlucky ones, 18 months of medical school, which is just the classroom work, nothing clinical whatsoever. And you have your 1 pile. Some of that will teeter over into step 1. That's step 1 pile that you have for your dedicated. Some people have 4 weeks to focus on step 1 and dedicated. Others, like my school, had 8 weeks. Or you may need more than that. But you have a separate pile for step 1. And then you have another pile, which is a whole different beast, which is clinicals. We're not going to worry about that because you got to get through step 1 until you can actually approach the clinical stuff. At least that's how it was at my school. Apparently, you can start your clinicals without passing step 1, and you have to pass it within a certain period, which is wild to me. I feel like it gives people very much an upper edge, right? So, yeah. But you still got to pass it, right? And you can't do anything until you pass step 1. But it's 3 different piles, and that's one of the things that is very clear, and they make it very clear. So step 1 is a game. And to win, you need to know the rules. The exam doesn't test you on everything you've learned in medical school. It tests you on specific skills, pattern recognition, critical thinking, and the ability to apply broad concepts in a very focused way. You don't need to know everything, but you do need to know how to use what you know effectively. And it very much feels like you're walking a tightrope from one end to the other, and you're trying to balance a bike on your hand. And if your balance isn't good, you may get caught slipping. I found myself doing thousands of UWorld questions and Anki cards, not because I was trying to learn more medicine, but because I was trying to train myself to think the way step 1 required. I had to shift my focus from mastering content to mastering the test itself. This was frustrating because I felt like I was sacrificing my passion for learning medicine in favor of just getting through the exam. And because it was just a pass-fail, you don't even know your score. You don't even get a real score. You just get a pass. I'm like, come on now, dude. So we have my buddy Roscoe here. And he's like, let's learn medicine. And he is stomping away and he is ready for action. But then, out of nowhere, USMLE just pops its ugly head and is like, not so fast, and becomes the bearer of bad news. Obviously, that sucks all the wind out of Roscoe, and he is not happy right now. And so then he just goes over to his desk and he puts his head on the table, and towering over him is just a whole bunch of tests that he has to get through in order to enjoy the thing that he signed up for. And that is very much what my experience was. You can do whatever you want as long as you pass those exams. You ain't passing those exams, you ain't doing nothing. And so another issue I encountered during my preparation was the quality of the resources available. Let's be honest. The production value of most medical education resources is pretty poor compared to the media that we consume on a daily basis. And me as an animator, somebody that has worked in animation and entertainment for the past 15 years, I was grossly underwhelmed. I was like, this is what we got? This is what? And y'all paying for what? How much for this? Grossly underwhelmed. You know, we're used to high quality YouTube videos, slick interfaces, and engaging visuals. But when it comes to medical education, many of those resources have what we call an outdated look. They're boring and they're pretty poorly designed. Hopefully I could do something to change that. For the most part, it's a whole bunch of videos of somebody that has a camera, they have a whiteboard, and they're doing what is a PowerPoint presentation or a board presentation. It's a presentation, right? Not flashy. You don't have explosions. Like, come on, bro. So I firmly believe that if medical education resources were created with the same level of attention to quality and user experience as the entertainment we consume, it would drastically improve the learning process. Students today are more visually inclined, and we crave resources that are interactive, engaging, and visually appealing. As a neuroscientist, that's what the basis of my research is, and there's so much data to support that, like, it works. We just don't know why there isn't more of it. As a creator, I know why there isn't more, but it's just a matter of bridging that gap. And at least for me, in my PhD research, I get the opportunity to at least explore that, which is really fun. You know, we're stuck with the dry textbooks and clunky online platforms that don't match our learning styles. And that's a tough pill to swallow sometimes. But what do we do about that? Now let's trim the fat. All right, so here's the deal. Let me break it down for you real quick and clean. Non-traditional path. Who cares? You don't have to follow some cookie cutter road just to get to where you're going. Football player, freelance artist, medical school, doesn't matter. Your path is your own. Make it your own. The big thing is persistence is key. Surgeries, rejections, failures. It's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up. The key takeaway, stick to it. Your persistence is what gets you across the finish line, not perfection. Step 1 isn't about medicine. It's about the game. Let's be real. Studying for step 1 isn't about mastering medicine. It's about mastering the test. The resources out there, most of them are a hot mess. They don't match up with the exam's priorities, and that's a problem. Your job isn't to drown in the books. It's to figure out how to study smarter, not harder. The resource gap is very real. There's a big disconnect between what these so-called STEP resources teach and what actually shows up on the exam. Recognize this early, and you'll save yourself tons of frustration. So in Chapter 2, I'll hit you with the raw details of my Step 1 attempt for the first time, what went wrong, how I turned it around, and the strategies that worked when the stakes were at the highest. So stay tuned. You're going to want to hear this. And remember, persistence isn't optional. It's the game plan. So let's keep moving. Chapter 2, my Step 1 experience. This chapter delves into my initial Step 1 failure and the lesson I learned from it. I reflect on why my first attempt at Step 1 didn't go as planned and inefficiencies in my Step 1 study approach. More importantly, I discuss how I took those lessons to completely overhaul my preparation strategy for the second attempt. And so what you could expect from this chapter is a candid look at the struggles I had failing Step 1, key lessons I learned about studying efficiently versus studying harder, and a shift in mindset towards mastering test-taking strategies rather than just memorizing content. And so one of the reasons why I struggled, the first time I sat down to study for Step 1, I approached it like most other medical students would. I piled up all my resources and recommendations, got deep into the UWorld question bank, and tried to tackle as many Anki cards as possible. I had heard all the advice: do thousands of questions, cover as much content as you can, and make sure you know how to fit the entire first aid book in your head like the back of your hand. But despite everything I did right, I still didn't pass on my first attempt. And I was just like, what the heck, dude? And often it's just like so much stuff that you have to do, and it, things that are high yield, things that are low yield, all that, right? And so looking back, I realized that my failure wasn't due to my lack of effort or my intelligence. It wasn't a poor reflection of me. It was due to an inefficiency in my process and just how I approached things. I was spending countless hours studying, but I wasn't studying the right way. I was trying to cover every possible approach on a topic instead of focusing on the areas that would truly help me on my exam. I was memorizing facts rather than understanding how to apply them in the context of Step 1's specific test structure, which is very clinical. I will say, very clinical. If you're trying to figure out how to apply things, just understand how to apply it in a clinical vignette. If you can do that, we're golden. If you can't do that, you're screwed. So the reality of Step 1. Step 1 isn't a knowledge-based exam. It's an application-based test. It doesn't ask you to recite facts or definitions. It asks you to take the knowledge you've built over the past 2 years and apply it to a complex real-world clinical scenario. This means that even if you know everything in first aid, or you have everything memorized in terms of the UWorld explanations, it won't really matter unless you can connect the dots and apply that knowledge to answer questions efficiently. And I'll go deeper into like what that looks like in practice, but just knowing random facts isn't going to help you. And so just because you know stuff doesn't mean that you can connect the dots in the way that they're asking you to. And that's the big thing. On my first attempt, I spent 8 months preparing. I did nearly 5,000 UWorld questions, reviewed about 100,000 Anki cards, and read through countless resources. Yet, when I sat down for the exam, only about 5 to 10% of what I studied on a daily basis seemed to show up on the actual exam. I could be a little biased, but it was really low yield. The material that I had been drilling just didn't seem to align with the way the questions were asked. And that experience just left me feeling just disoriented, forced me to question whether this path was really right for me. So what went wrong? The problem was that my study approach wasn't aligned with the structure that the actual test had. I spent months trying to cover a vast breadth of information without understanding how to narrow my focus to the most critical high-yield areas. I hadn't mastered the art of translating knowledge into test-taking skills. I was focused too much on memorizing and not enough on practicing the application of that knowledge to the kinds of questions that Step 1 presents. Just because you do a lot of questions doesn't mean you know how to answer a question properly and you know how to use questions effectively. But we'll talk about that later. When I finally took the exam, it became obvious that the questions on Step 1 were very different from those that I had practiced. The practice exams and the question banks I had used were helpful to a point, but they didn't replicate the format or the distribution of the actual exam questions. And the distribution really matters. Step 1 tests your ability to recognize patterns and make connections and apply concepts in a time-pressured environment. It's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing how to answer the questions you're given. After failing it the first time, I knew I had to change my approach. I couldn't keep trying to learn everything. Instead, I needed to focus on high-yield material and master the art of test taking. I had to prioritize efficiency over brute force memorization. And I had to stop wasting time on resources that weren't helping me develop the skills I needed to pass the exam. That was the big thing. So what I learned, the most important lesson I learned from my first Step 1 attempt was that studying for the exam isn't about content mastery. It's about test mastery. Step 1 isn't designed to test everything you know. It's designed to see if you can apply what you know under pressure. The key is not to study more, but to study smarter. It's about efficiency, targeted practice, and learning how to approach each question with a strategy. Now it's time to get real about what went wrong, what went right, and how to cut through the BS. My first attempt was just a crash and burn. I overstudied, I relied on outdated methods, and thought brute force would get me through. Spoiler, it didn't. Studying for months doesn't mean anything if you're not studying the right way. My second attempt was working smarter, not harder. I stopped trying to learn everything and I stayed focused on how to take the test. The goal isn't about knowing it all, it's about applying what you know under pressure. Step 1 is application, not memorization. This test isn't about regurgitating facts. You need facts, but you don't regurgitate them. You apply them in what you know to be true in clinical situations. Focus on connecting the dots, not drowning in endless details. The details don't matter. It's a multiple choice test. You probably wouldn't have chosen those answers to begin with, but those are the ones that are presented. You want to study hard, but that doesn't mean you're studying right. For me, 8 months of grinding the wrong way got me nowhere. I had to rethink everything. I had to be more efficient, not be more effortful. If your study plan isn't strategic, you're just spinning your wheels. UWorld and Anki are tools, not magic wands. Don't let these resources own you. Use them to refine your test-taking skills, not as a crutch for memorization. Practice questions are your secret weapon, but only if you use them to learn how to answer questions, not just to review content. Medical school is not the same as Step 1 prep, and that was a tough pill to swallow. What medical school teaches you doesn't prepare you for STEP as much as you think it does. It's a different beast entirely. So just adjust your mindset. You're not studying to ace your coursework. You're training for the test. You can't learn it all, so don't even try. High-yield content is your best friend. Forget trying to master everything. It's impossible. You don't have the capacity and you don't have the time. Learn to prioritize what matters and get surgical with your question answering skills, because that's what's going to get you down the road. In Chapter 3, I'll break down test-taking strategies that turned everything around for me. From understanding how to dissect a passage to mastering the art of elimination. I'll show you how to think like the test maker. Stay sharp. This is where the real learning begins. And bottom line, stop running a marathon when you're training for a sprint. Get strategic, get efficient, focus on what actually matters, and let's get after it. Chapter 3, how Step 1 is different from medical school. In this chapter, I'll explain how Step 1 differs fundamentally from the exams you've taken in medical school. Step 1 isn't just a test of knowledge. It's an application-based exam that requires you to think critically under pressure. This chapter explores the exam structure, time management challenges it presents, and how to adjust your study habits accordingly. You could expect a breakdown of Step 1's structure and how it differs from medical school exams, the shift from memorizing facts to applying clinical reasoning, and also strategies for managing your time effectively and approaching clinical vignettes. The transition from medical school to Step 1 is one of the most challenging parts of medical education. It's what they call dedicated preparation. It's not just the sheer volume of material that makes it hard. It's the way you're tested. Medical school exams focus on testing your knowledge of individual concepts, often in isolation, with clear questions and straightforward answers. Step 1, on the other hand, tests your ability to apply broad, interconnected knowledge to complex clinical scenarios. It's not just about what you know, it's about how you use what you know. And that's the kicker. The most jarring thing from my Step 1 experience was realizing just how different it was from an exam I had taken in medical school. It wasn't about regurgitating information. It was about pattern recognition, time management, and critical thinking, all under significant amount of pressure. You have the MCAT, you have medical school, and then Step 1 is a whole nother beast. And so the Step 1 structure of the exam is pretty straightforward, with some questionable things that you kind of have to get used to. You have 280 questions, you have 7 blocks, 40 questions per block, 60 minutes per block of 40 questions. There's 80 experimental questions, and a total time of 8 hours, with a 45-minute break that you can add to, kinda, because you have a tutorial that is 15 minutes, so you can have up to 60 minutes worth of a break. And typically you have about 90 seconds per question, and out of the 280 questions, minus the 80 experimental questions that are not scored, you have a total of 200 scored questions that you need to get at least 63 to 64% of right in order for you to pass STEP. Yeah. And so let's just sort of break down what that means for STEP and why it's so unique, right? So again, the number of questions, we have 280 broken down into 7 blocks of 40 questions. The blocks are timed, and you have about 60 minutes to complete each block, which averages about 90 seconds per question. I mentioned those experimental questions, which there's 80 of them on your exam, and those are not meant to be scored. The frustrating part is that you won't know which ones are experimental and which ones aren't. So you need to treat each question as if it counts. Even if it doesn't, you will never know. And the time pressure, you have about 8 hours to complete the exam, including a 45-minute break time. If you skip the tutorial at the beginning of the exam, you can add those extra 15 minutes to your break time, giving you 60 minutes, which is a lifesaver when you're trying to navigate the grueling day of the test. But you have to use your breaks sparingly, and you have to keep track of it all. If you don't, then you can run the risk of running out of break time, and whatever break you take cuts into your block time. And that sucks. Usually sneaks up on people at the end of the exam between blocks 6 and 7. Step 1 doesn't just test your ability to answer questions. It tests your stamina, your focus, your ability to stay calm under pressure. You're not just racing against the clock, you're managing mental fatigue and stress throughout the day as well. And so when you're preparing for Step 1, you want to prepare for this, the fatigue. You want to prepare for the stress. You want to prepare for all those things as you are also preparing your mental Rolodex for being able to pull stuff out. So it's a physical endeavor. Key differences between medical school and Step 1. In medical school, you're often tested on specific siloed pieces of information. Think, what is the mechanism of action of this drug, or what are the clinical features of these diseases? Pretty much straightforward questions for the most part. That can usually be answered if you're memorizing the material, right? Step 1 is different. The questions are clinical vignettes that present you with a patient scenario requiring you to analyze situations and figure out what's going on before even answering the question. The vignettes often include extraneous information, meaning you need to sift through it all to find what's actually relevant. And the question isn't simply what drug treats hypertension, but given this patient's complex presentation, what medication is the most appropriate, right? And so it's asking the same thing, just worded differently. And the best way that I like to describe it is If you're used to speaking and talking a certain way and listening to certain things a certain way, the board exam wording is very much like trying to learn a second language for the most part, because you have to translate what they actually mean in the actual exam. This shift from direct recall to clinical reasoning is what makes step one so difficult. You're not just recalling facts, you're interpreting them and applying them to clinical scenarios. And so if the subjects in your mind are neatly organized in their own respective boxes, think about step one as just a hodgepodge of everything. Everything is fair game and everything is interconnected. So pattern recognition, the key to step one for the most part. One of the most important skills for step one is pattern recognition. The exam tests whether you can quickly identify what's going on with the patient and match that to the right diagnosis or treatment. You need to be able to recognize clinical patterns, so common presentations of diseases and conditions, diagnostic patterns, so the key diagnostic tests or labs associated with those specific conditions, and treatment patterns, the first line treatment for common conditions and mechanisms behind them. For the most part, you don't need to treat, but you need to know what will happen if somebody was treated with something. And so the way I could describe it is, there's all these situations that you can't choose, and you have to recognize what is the one that is actually accurate for the right answer. Step one is designed to see if you can identify these patterns quickly under pressure. And in the context of a complex patient scenario, if you can't recognize the pattern, you'll struggle to answer the questions in the 90 seconds that you're given. And that's when you get caught slipping. So the role of time management. Time management is another crucial difference between medical school and step one. In medical school, you might have time to think through each question slowly and carefully. Step one doesn't give you that luxury. With 90 seconds per question, you need to be efficient and strategic with your time, which means skimming unnecessary information because not every detail in the question is relevant. So you need to learn how to identify what matters quickly. Also prioritizing certain questions. Some questions are designed to be answered in less than 90 seconds, while others may require more time. It's not designed that way, but it may take you more time. Knowing how to allocate your time effectively is key. If you finished one in 30 seconds, then that gives you a little bit more time for your other questions. That doesn't mean you need to take all that time, but at least you have it. How to shift your study approach. You want to train for the exam. Don't try to cram until your brain hurts. Build those mental muscles. So think about your brain as being on overload when you're trying to memorize, and think about you trying to buff out when you're learning how to apply the stuff. We want application, not memorization. To prepare for step one, you need to shift your focus from memorizing information to mastering the test-taking process. And here's how. Focus on application. Not just memorizing facts anymore, you're learning how to apply those facts in a clinical scenario. This means prioritizing practice questions over content review and spending more time reviewing UWorld and NBME practice questions than rereading textbooks. You want to think about things in the context of how you're actually being tested, not outside of that context. Mastering clinical reasoning. You need to learn how to think like a clinician, which means focusing on how to approach clinical cases, not just what is the right answer. You want to practice under time conditions. Get used to the time pressure of step one. You need to practice answering questions under time conditions. Doing 40 blocks with a timer will help you build the stamina and efficiency you need to get through the exam. You don't need to do 200 questions a day. You could be good with 80 to 100, but you need to know how to answer the questions in a timely manner when you're actually doing the questions. Your review process, whole different story, but you shouldn't be spending 7 hours doing 80 questions. No, it's unacceptable. So this is a dirty little secret about step one. And this is something that really took me some time to come to terms with, is that since 2020, the pass rate for step one has dropped. What that means is that every year you could expect more people to fail step one, essentially. And so to put it into practice and to put it into context, 2020, the pass rate was at 98%. Now it's probably below 90. And so one thing you'll notice about step one is if you look at the history of the exam post-pandemic, the exam has gotten exceedingly more difficult since 2020. The pass rate has dropped from 98% to below 90 in 3 years. And this is for first-time MD test takers, not including anybody else. And so yes, it has kind of gotten harder. And so people don't want to admit it, but they're kind of playing in our faces, to be honest with you. And often they're saying, oh, because it's pass fail, people aren't going to class, people aren't focused, you're sleeping too much, you're partying too much, playing too many video games, you're taking too many vacations, too much self-care, you're failing and it's your fault. But that's not the experience that everybody has. And for the most part, it's a traumatic experience. And I know a bunch of people that are still going through it right now, regardless of it being pass fail. And so since it's became pass fail, it has become exceedingly more challenging. And that's one thing to note. And they're not doing anything to improve it. So pay attention to that. Don't get caught slipping. Now let's just trim the fat. So listen up, future doctors. Step one isn't about flexing how much you've memorized. It's about showing how well you can apply what you know. So let's break this down. Application, not recall. Medical school exams ask you to regurgitate facts. Step one does not. It's all about applying the knowledge to clinical scenarios. So think critically. If you're just memorizing, you're playing the wrong game. Clinical vignettes are the main event. Every question is wrapped in a patient scenario, and they're not short. You need to decode symptoms, lab values, histories to get the right answer. It's all about pattern recognition. Spot the clues and connect the dots. 1 + 1 = 2. A + B = C. Time management is your secret weapon. You've got 90 seconds per question. Waste time and you're toast. Practicing staying focused and efficient so you can crush even the toughest questions under pressure. It's the name of the game. Stop memorizing, start solving. If you're glued to your textbook, you're studying wrong. Shift gears to practice questions. NBME, UWorld, self-assessments. They're pretty much your best friend at this point. Use questions to train your brain to think like the test makers. I know it sounds cliche, but as an athlete, I won my starting job on the field. I practice on the field, I play on the field. If you want to do well, you have to train in the conditions that you're going to be tested in. That's it. Step one is a problem-solving marathon. It's not about knowing every obscure enzyme or gene. It's about applying your knowledge, thinking critically, and managing your time like a boss. You're not expected to come up out of nowhere with this magical answer. The answer is right in front of you. Just pick the right one and recognize which ones are wrong. In Chapter 4, I'll show you exact strategies I use to bounce back after failing my first attempt. And this is where we get tactical, step-by-step techniques to break down questions, eliminate wrong answers, and boost your efficiency. So bottom line, forget the fluff. Step one is about thinking fast, problem solving, and playing the game smarter than the next person. And it's not a zero-sum game. Everybody can pass. And one person passing has no impact on you passing. So buckle up and let's get after it. Chapter 4, tips from failing step one to passing. Here, I share specific strategies I use after failing step one that helped me pass on my second attempt. I focus on creating a sustainable study schedule using targeted question blocks and balancing study with self-care, which is really important. This chapter also covers how I incorporated daily mantras, mindfulness, and meditation to manage stress and stay focused. And so in this chapter, you could expect the actionable steps I took to improve my study approach after failing it the first time. Also, how to structure your study days for maximum productivity and minimal burnout. And tips for balancing study with self-care and stress management. So what went wrong the first time, right? That's probably what you're asking. When I first prepared for step one, I did everything by the book, or so I thought. I followed the conventional advice, 2 to 3 blocks of 40 UWorld questions every single day, mixed. hours of reading first aid, and daily Anki review with the Anki deck. I watched all the Pathoma videos, I watched all the sketchy videos, and I tried to cram as much information as possible in a small amount of time every single day. Despite this, I still failed on my first attempt. Sucked. And so here's what I learned about why my approach didn't work. One, there's too much content and not enough strategy. I focused on covering everything instead of honing my test-taking skills. I was doing 5,000 UWorld questions and 100,000 Anki cards, but I wasn't practicing how to apply the knowledge efficiently. I was just shooting from the hip and hoping that my energy and my determination was going to get me to the finish line. And it just didn't work that way. Burnout. Studying over 12 hours a day with no real breaks for 8 months straight left me freaking exhausted. By the time the exam came, I had lost focus, and mental fatigue affected me and my performance. And then there was content overload. I fell into this trap of trying to review every piece of information out there. I spent too much time on resources that weren't actually helping me prepare for the way step one was asking questions. You're not taking an exam based off of a sketchy video. Nothing against sketchy, but sketchy is not step one. So what worked the second time around? Well, I can tell you. After failing, I had to reassess my strategy. I needed to approach step one differently. Instead of cramming content, I focused on mastering the test-taking process. And here are the major changes that I personally made to get me over that hump. One, I focused on targeted practice. I switched to doing 80 questions with strategic blocks rather than random 40 question mix blocks. I broke these down by topic based on the NBME question breakdown that they had published every single year, focusing on the highest yield content areas like biochemistry, general principles, and communications. I developed a crib sheet system. So instead of just passively reviewing questions, I created crib sheets to summarize every question I got wrong in 1 or 2 sentences, or a better way to show it is, what did I need to know to get the question right in less than 90 seconds? These crib sheets became my go-to for review material. I reviewed them every morning and every night, which helped me reinforce what I was missing. Because for me, I just needed to get my reps. I needed to prioritize reviewing so that I was able to build those mental muscles. The third thing was daily mantras and mindfulness and prioritizing that. To combat burnout and maintain mental health, I started every day with a personal mantra and incorporated daily meditation. Every day, rain, sleet, or snow, 3:30 hit, I was getting my 10 to 15 minute meditation in. This helped me stay grounded and calm, reducing my stress levels as the exam day approached. And it was really helpful. Then I started my Pomodoro method for studying. Instead of doing a marathon of study sessions, I used a Pomodoro technique. And that was 45 minutes of studying, followed by a 15-minute break, just to stay fresh and focused. And so within 1 hour, I would have a study session and a break. And I would do that for 8 to 10 hours. Over time, I built up to longer sessions without losing focus. And the goal was to replicate the sessions that I would have for my actual study or step one exam. So 60 minutes of work and then having a 10-minute break, 5 to 10 minutes. I focused on better rest and recovery as well. I made sure to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night, drinking plenty of water, and engage in hobbies like reading, comics, working out for at least an hour a day. And these allowed me to really take breaks and recharge so I could study more effectively. And then consistent review. That was the big one. I didn't take any full days off from reviewing, but I also didn't overwork myself on my light days. Every day, I did a light review of my crib sheets, even if it was on break days. This helped me stay sharp without burning out. With dedicated, yes, taking breaks is good, but how you approach taking breaks is what matters. Going cold turkey is not the business. And I could tell you because as a Division I college football player, I always wanted to take opportunities to just not do anything. But in order for you to stay in shape, both mentally and physically, There's no days off. You could take light days where you could spend 1 or 2 hours a day, but just like brushing your teeth, just like taking a shower, this is just one of those things you have to commit. You wouldn't not brush your teeth just because you don't want to do anything. So think about it like that. Here's a breakdown of what I did differently in my second attempt to pass step 1. Take a baseline practice exam first week. Start by taking a practice exam to assess where you're at. This gives you a realistic baseline to work from. Then from there, you could use targeted questions instead of 40-question random mixed blocks. Focus on 80 questions for the day based on high-yield content of specific areas. You'll cover more ground this way, and you won't waste time on overrepresented topics such as cardio, renal, and pulm. And you could incorporate more communications and neuro into that. Crib sheets are the savior. For every question you get wrong, write a 1 to 2 sentence explanation about the information you need to know to get the question right in 90 seconds. Review the crib sheets every morning and every night to reinforce your weak areas. Daily mantras and meditation. Start your day with a mantra that centers you and include a 15 to 20-minute meditation session every day. This will help reduce your anxiety and improve your focus. Pomodoro techniques. Use 45 minutes of study sessions followed by a 15-minute break, and gradually increase your study sessions to improve your stamina while also reducing your break time to also improve your stamina. But make sure to take structured breaks to avoid burnout. Then review and rest. You want to find a way to balance that. Don't skip review, even on days off. However, don't overload yourself. A short 30-minute review of your crib sheets on a rest day is enough to keep the material fresh for you. It's time to trim the fat. Let's talk about strategy. You can grind all day, but if you're not working smart, you're spinning your wheels. Here's the blueprint for smarter, more efficient step 1 game plan. Study smart, not hard. Don't cram every fact from first aid. Focus on learning how to play the game. Master question formats, key concepts, and test-taking strategies. Crib sheets are your secret weapon. When you get a question wrong, jot down a one-liner with the key info you missed. Review these daily instead of rereading books. And trust me, reviewing concise notes beats drowning in pages of fluff any day. Pomodoro like a pro. Use Pomodoro timers, 25-minute study, 5-minute break, 45-minute study, 15-minute break to stay sharp and avoid frying your brain on a daily basis. Consistency over chaos. Stay structured, stay focused. And mental health is a non-negotiable. Start your day with a mantra, take mental breaks, and keep up with your hobbies. This isn't about passing step. It's about coming out on the other side in one piece, more enriched. Be careful with practice exams. Practice exams are helpful, but they do not always reflect the current content distribution of the real exam. Don't rely on practice exams to gauge your readiness. Instead, focus on consistent performance in your daily suggested question blocks to track your improvement. If you're doing good on a daily basis, your practice exams should reflect that, and so should your step 1 experience. Building a sustainable routine is the name of the game. Focus on efficiency, target your weak spots, and don't neglect your mental health. Burnout won't get you to the finish line. Smart, structured effort will. In Chapter 5, I'll show you how to create a balanced study schedule that juggles practice questions, content review, and rest. Because you're not a robot, and you gotta pace yourself to win this marathon. So bottom line, work smarter, not harder. Build your routine with focus, precision, and self-care. Step 1 isn't about grinding, it's about strategy. Now let's get you to the next level and over the step 1 journey. Chapter 5, Understanding Learning Styles and Finding What Works for You. Medical school is demanding, and many students, including myself, find themselves spending countless hours reading, watching videos, and doing practice questions, only to feel like they're barely scraping by. I often found myself comparing my effort to other students who seem to spend less time but achieve better results. This chapter is about what I discovered during my struggle to figure out why the traditional method was not working for me, and finding how the right learning style helped turn the tide for me. It was a game changer. So the struggle, when traditional methods just don't work. The inefficiency of traditional study methods. Like many students, I spent countless hours reading first aid, doing UWorld questions, and watching Boards and Beyond videos, among other things. Despite this, I wasn't seeing any improvement in what I expected. Recognizing the inefficiency. No matter how hard I worked, my results suggested otherwise. It was as if the sacrifices I made and the long hours I spent studying weren't reflected in my exam scores. This led to emotional strain, burnout, and affected my physical and mental health. The role of learning styles in academic performance. Personal background and its impact on learning. I came from a Black American family and grew up as a second-generation college student. I am also the first person in my family to pursue medicine. Most of my achievements came from me excelling in the football field and not necessarily academics. I did excel in academics, but the way I paid my bills was through my athletic performance. My resilience and my determination came from my experience as an athlete, but those traits didn't directly translate into academic success in the traditional sense. As someone used to thriving on physical performance and teamwork, the isolation of studying felt foreign and counterproductive. Cultural expectations and external pressures. Being a medical student also meant becoming a point of contact for family members who saw me as their access point to healthcare. Balancing these cultural responsibilities with medical school was an unexpected challenge that I had to learn how to navigate myself. Because if I'm not good, nobody else will be. Learning styles, what they are and why they matter. We have different types of learning styles. We have visual learners, which benefit from diagrams, flowcharts, and visual cues. We have auditory learners, who learn best by listening to lectures, reading aloud, and engaging in discussions. We got reading and writing learners, who prefer learning through reading and writing notes, such as flashcards or other study guides. And then we have kinesthetic learners, those that excel when they can interact with materials physically, through hands-on practice or engaging with models. Me, I'm a bit of a visual and a kinesthetic learner. Finding your learning style. I eventually sought help from a learning specialist and underwent evaluations to understand what my learning style was. This was the first step in figuring out what worked for me and what I didn't need to do. And what I learned is that I'm a kinesthetic learner and I'm also a visual learner, but I'm mainly a kinesthetic learner. So I need to do more stuff in order to get more from it. But you could throw in a little bit of auditory as well. What worked for me? A kinesthetic and auditory approach. Football and kinesthetic learning. I played football for over 12 years, and my ability to learn plays, run drills, and visualize strategies translated into my medical studies. I learned that my brain worked best when I engaged with information physically. This realization really helped me switch my approach to medical education. Reps and standardized testing practice. I found that I needed repetitions to truly understand and retain the material. So that meant a lot of practice questions. I did as many as possible to get in those reps. Also handwriting notes, writing down stuff that I needed to know, helped me reinforce the concepts that I saw in those practice questions. And then also reading aloud. Reading my notes aloud every morning and every night activated my auditory learning strengths. And so instead of watching videos and passively engaging with things, I was actively engaging with all the things that I needed to do. And it was exhausting at first. I'm not going to lie. But once you get used to doing something, it becomes second nature. And that's all you know after a while. And when you go back to things that are less challenging, you feel like you're discounting yourself. So we want to challenge ourselves the best that we can. Combining methods for maximum efficiency. Active engagement through multiple senses. To improve my efficiency, I combined visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learning techniques. Creating Anki flashcards. I made cards with clinical vignettes and key concepts focusing on mechanisms of action, enzyme deficiencies, and anatomy. My morning and my night review. I read my crib sheets aloud twice a day to reinforce memory through active participation. Kinesthetic engagement. By physically writing down the notes and then reading them, I was using multiple forms of engagement to boost retention. And then I would reinforce that with the other stuff that I just said. Intentional rest and avoiding burnout. I learned to rest intentionally, making sure I took breaks just as seriously as studying. That team no sleep mentality from football, that wasn't cutting it. It just wasn't sustainable. I realized that quality study time followed by quality rest time led to me having better results on a day-to-day basis and in the long term. And boy, like, I kid you not, it was a game changer for me. It's time to trim the fat. Let's talk about making your study routine work for you, not against you. Here's a playbook. Identify your learning style. Are you a visual learner that loves diagrams and charts? An auditory learner? Lectures and discussions are your jam? Reading and writing learner? Pen and paper? Or a kinesthetic learner? Hands-on all the way. Figuring this out first is the step towards optimizing your study game. Diversify your learning techniques. Don't be a one-trick pony. Mix it up. Use a blend of study methods, tackling practice questions, scribbling notes by hand, drawing flowcharts, read aloud, or even teach concepts to your cat. Nimbus approves that. Although, I'm allergic to cats, so if you have a dog, I will replace the cat with the dog. This keeps your brain engaged and ensures you're covering all angles, because you want to be ready for everything. Prioritize rest and avoid burnout. Hustle culture has no place here. Rest hard to work smarter. Get your 7 to 8 hours of sleep and step away when you're spinning your wheels. Sustainability wins the race. Accept that struggle's part of the process. Newsflash. Struggling doesn't mean you don't belong. You're here because you're capable. Struggles are normal. It's about finding your rhythm, adjusting, and grinding through it. Your success in medical school isn't just about logging hours. It's about how you use those hours you logged in. Learn your way, whether it's sketching out pathways, watching videos, or drilling practice questions. Lean into what works for you. And don't forget, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Take care of yourself along the way and don't lose yourself in the process. Now that you've explored how to leverage your learning style, it's time to take things up a notch. In the next chapter, we'll dive into building a sustainable, high-impact study plan tailored to your needs, from structuring your day to prioritizing practice questions and review. I'll walk you through the steps to craft a schedule that balances learning, rest, and life outside of medicine. Let's make your plan work as hard as you do. And bottom line, medical school is brutal, but you've got the tools to make it manageable. Find your style, play to your strengths, and own your journey. Chapter 6, Building a Study Schedule for Step 1. A well-structured study schedule is key to success in Step 1, without burning out. In this chapter, I outline how to build a balanced study routine that incorporates UWorld questions or any other practice question bank, Anki reviews, breaks, and rest. I also provide a sample weekly schedule with tips on how to adjust it based on your personal progress and practice exam results. So what to expect? We're going to figure out the importance of structuring your study time for sustainability, a detailed, flexible study schedule for your dedicated period, and how to integrate review sessions, breaks, and active learning into your routine. Study schedule structure. One of the most critical aspects of preparing for Step 1 is building a study schedule that is both effective and sustainable. Studying for 10 to 12 hours a day for weeks on end can easily lead to burnout if you don't pace yourself and structure your time correctly. The key to a successful study schedule is balancing focused study sessions with regular breaks, review, and recovery time. Here's how I structured my study schedule the second time around with a more targeted, efficient approach. So day 1, I just did a baseline practice exam. Before diving into content review or question banks, take a full-length practice exam, either UWorld or NBMEs. Personally, I like the UWorlds better. This will give you a good baseline of where you stand and provide insights into your strengths and weaknesses. Don't worry about getting a perfect score. This is just about measuring your starting point. After completing the exam, Analyze your results and call it a day. Tomorrow, you can use them to shape your study plan moving forward. Day 2. We're going to review our exam. Now that you've taken a practice exam and you have one under your belt, you have a good starting point on what your strengths and weaknesses are. This day is crucial because what you do today is what you'll be building on every single day from now on until you take your exam. With your practice exam open, review every question. And there's a couple of things you could do. If you got it right and you know why, then gloss over the explanation to confirm your assumptions and move on. Don't waste too much time on these. And if you don't know why, then write with a pen and paper a sentence of what you needed to know to answer the question right in 90 seconds. Limit this to 1 to 2 lines on a piece of paper and be as concise as possible. This will be your crib sheet for you to review. And if you got it wrong, add to your crib sheet with a 90-second explanation, just like we said before. If there are any drugs or clinical markers, jot them all down because those are must-know information you can incorporate into your spaced repetition. If you know these, you're more likely to get the questions right if they pop up. But again, don't beat a dead horse. After you finish reviewing your exam and making your crib sheets, close your computer, sit down in a calm place, and read over your crib sheets. Once you get to the end, call it a day. No need to beat a dead horse into the ground. You put in some serious work, now rest and recover. This is what we call training for the exam. Weekly study schedules. Your schedule should focus on targeted study blocks based on the official NBME content distribution document that's published every year. And review while leaving time for rest and recovery. I recommend following an 8-day schedule with 1 day set aside for lighter review and breaks. Here's a sample structure. Monday through Saturday, or days 1 through 6. These are your intensive study days. For me, I'm an early riser, so at 6:30 to 7, I start my day with a mantra, mindfulness routine, eat breakfast, stretch, do some self-care, and do some hygiene stuff. Once 7 o'clock hits, from 7 to 8, that's my first Pomodoro block, and I usually read over my crib sheets and high-yield Step 1000 charts each. From 8 to 12, I focus on my 80-question practice question blocks. Choose blocks based on the high-yield content areas like biochem, general principles, biostats, and communications. I also use tutor mode and review my incorrects after I do them. I write 1 to 2 lines with a pen and paper for each wrong answer and summarize what I needed to know to get the question right in 90 seconds or less. And these summaries are my crib sheets. 12 to 1 is my lunch break. So I take a mental break and engage in something non-academic. From 1 to 3:30, that's where my Anki 1000 decks come in, where I'm doing 500 to 1,000 cards. And I focus on knowing clinical markers, mechanisms of action, and being able to recall them in less than 15 seconds per card. If I'm spending more than 15 seconds per card, then I got to pick up the pace. This is rapid fire review. 3:30 to 5:30, it's the end of the day with some crib sheets, light review of some Step 1000 charts, and focus on areas of weakness identified earlier in the day. And then from 5:30 p.m. to the end of my day, just time to enjoy life. Enjoy a hobby or activity to disconnect from the studying. I like to read comic books, work out, spend time with my family. Just make sure you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep to recharge for the next day. Day 7, or Sunday, is my light review and rest day. So I start my day the same as I did the other 6 days. 6:30 to 7, start with the mantra, mindfulness routine, eat breakfast, stretch, do some self-care and hygiene stuff. Then from 7 to 12, review my crib sheets, Step 1000 charts, and some Anki deck stuff. Normally about 300 to 500 cards. And then after 12 p.m., get some lunch, rest, focus on self-care, mental recovery, and enjoy life and the people around me. Key focus areas for your schedule. Practice questions. UWorld blocks or any question bank should form the backbone of your study schedule. Aim for 80 to 120 questions a day, broken down into 2 sessions. This is where you'll gain most of the insights into your test-taking ability and your knowledge gaps. Crib sheets. Reviewing your crib sheets twice a day helps you reinforce weak areas and this should be a key component of your study routine and your review repetitions. Spaced repetition. I'm pretty bullish about Anki, but as a technologist, I am apt to use tools that make things easier. The Anki 1000 decks and the Step 1000 charts are best used for fast, repetitive recall of key concepts. Focus on mastering clinical markers, drug mechanisms, and disease patterns. Read over the charts first, then corresponding Anki decks to build those recall muscles over time. Oh yeah, we want to get recall buff for Step 1. And then breaks. Breaks and rest. Regular breaks are essential for maintaining focus and avoiding burnout. Make sure to give yourself about 7 to 8 hours of sleep and dedicate Sundays to lighter review and relaxation. Your days off, don't do questions, but also don't skip your review sessions. Again, treat your review sessions like brushing your teeth. You wouldn't want to walk around with funky breath, and you don't want to have gaps in your knowledge. Pomodoro and time management. To manage study time effectively, use the Pomodoro method. Start with 45-minute study sessions followed by 15-minute breaks for 6 to 7 rounds. Over time, you can increase to 50-minute study sessions if you feel comfortable, and then increase the amount of rounds to 10 to 12. Structured study time is more effective than a marathon of unbroken sessions. We want to avoid burnout by any means necessary, so set yourself up for success. 8-week study timeline suggestions. Depending on where you are when you take your baseline practice exam, your study timeline might vary. However, a solid 8-week plan looks like this. Phase 1, which is about weeks 1 and 2, focus on high-yield NBME content areas such as general principles, biochemistry, communications, complete 80 to 100 questions a day, and review your crib sheets. Do a full pass or two of all the Step 1000 charts, and at least 2 passes of all the Anki 1000, Core 1000 card decks during this phase. And also don't forget to do a practice test on day 1. That is a total of about 5,600 Anki cards and 100 pages of reading. This phase is all about getting a good baseline of what to expect and understanding how to train for the exam. Once you complete that, you have phase 2, which is normally weeks 3 to 4. Here, you're going to begin to mix in lower yield topics while continuing your high yield review from phase 1. Take a practice exam at the end of week 4. Phase 3. It's about weeks 5 to 6. Analyze the results from your daily practice, not so much your practice exams, and tailor your study blocks to focus on your weaknesses. Continue with daily crib sheets and Step 1000 review as well. In phase 4, which is normally weeks 7 to 8, focus on refining your test-taking strategies. Take one more practice exam during week 7 and dedicate the final week to reviewing your crib sheets and key weak points with your question blocks. By this time, you should be scoring 70% to 80% on your daily question blocks throughout this phase. Nothing should change from day to day leading up to the exam. You can find an expanded 8-week schedule in the appendix and the suggested sequence of blocks for each phase in Chapter 7. And here's my study schedule example printout. You can see how everything that I mentioned is thoughtfully crafted into the different columns, and each row represents a day that you complete all the columns. And this is for about 14 days. What I normally did is when I completed a row in the column, after I put my date for that day and the days until the exam, I would just check off one of the rows in the column. And so the goal was to fill out every single row each day by just adding a check mark, just to show that I kept myself accountable. The more you check off, the more accountable you are to yourself, and you're putting in the work and you're actually showing it. Trimming the fat. Structure your study schedule around question practice and content review. Forget about going through endless textbooks. Focus on UWorld. Focus on your practice questions. Focus on your crib sheets. Focus on the Step 1000 charts. Keep your efforts streamlined and efficient. It may feel boring, but it gets the job done. Pomodoro method for time management. Study smart, not long. Work hard for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. Work hard for 45 minutes, take a 15-minute break. Do this consistently to keep your focus sharp. Include a rest day. Burnout is real. I don't know if you noticed, but it's real. Schedule days to charge your batteries. Rest is part of the grind. It's how you come back stronger. If you don't take a break, you can't come back from that break. Tailor your schedule to your needs. Your practice exam isn't just a score, it's a map. It's not a reliable map, I will say, because at this point, practice exams really venture off from what step one is actually asking from you every single year, especially depending on the practice exam that you take. That's another conversation. Use it to figure out what's holding you back and tweak your plan to crush those weak areas. Start with an 8-week timeline. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. An 8-week plan gives you enough time to build confidence without frying your brain. Stay consistent and trust the process. Consistency beats cramming every day. Build a study schedule that's structured, but flexible enough to adapt as you grow. Keep it balanced. Intense study sessions paired with regular breaks will get you to the finish line in one piece. You've got a blueprint for a killer study plan. Now let's talk about execution. In the next chapter, I'll show you how to supercharge your prep with practice questions and flashcards. Learn how to maximize these resources to reinforce your knowledge and sharpen your test-taking skills. So let's turn this theory into plain old action. Chapter 7, using practice questions and Anki efficiently. Practice questions and Anki are two of the most powerful tools for step one preparation, but only if it's used correctly. In this chapter, I'll walk you through how to make the most out of your practice questions and how to build effective Anki routine decks. I also explain why creating your own Anki cards is more effective than relying on third-party decks. So what you could expect is a step-by-step guide on using practice questions as targeted practice for improving your test-taking skills, and how to create personalized Anki decks with cards that reinforce what you need to know for step one. Also, strategies for combining your practice questions with your Anki decks to maximize retention and test performance. One of the big questions is, which question bank is better? A common question people ask is, which question bank is best for step one preparation? Both of the major options, Amboss and UWorld, are reputable. They invest significant resources into crafting questions that are relevant for USMLE Step 1, at least for MD programs. Unfortunately, I don't have much experience with DO programs, so I can't speak of how well these question banks align with their exams, but for MD medical schools, these are the main ones. The question isn't really about the quality of the questions, because they're both great in their respects, but more about how well the question banks reflect the actual exam's content distribution. It's all about how effectively the platform's interface supports your exam prep. And some are better than others depending on the person. Ultimately, your goal is to choose the question bank that gives you the most practice in areas that are the most relevant to step one, based on the exam's content distribution that USMLE publishes every single year. So there's a table that breaks down how many questions from UWorld and Amboss are dedicated to each system compared to the expected number of questions you'll see on step one for that system. You'll also find a column showing percentages of questions from 280 questions in step one exams, with the range that gives you an idea of the low, average, and high amount of questions you could expect from that system. So it's not an exact number, but it's a range. And so if that range overlaps with where your strengths are and your weaknesses are, that's what you need to focus on. When I analyze these question banks, I focus on the comparisons between the number of questions in the question bank versus the expected number of questions you could see in step one for each system. If there's a low number of questions in the question bank, but a high percentage of questions expected on step one, for that system, I prioritize that system during practice. On the flip side, systems that have a high number of questions in the question bank, but a low percentage of questions expected on the exam, that goes to low priority. I'm looking at you, cardio. So when assessing which question bank is better for your prep, it's smart to prioritize systems where the question bank offers an ample amount of practice for the areas that will be heavily tested on for step one based on the official content breakdown. This way, your study time is spent efficiently targeting high yield material consistently. And so when we look at the chart, you can see that we have a high amount of questions for multi-system. You could expect on average about 38. And then in general principles, you could expect about 39. But they've since gotten rid of general principles and they've distributed across all the different systems. And they've also added human development. And so with respect to human development, you could expect about 6. And then we have our neuro and behavioral stuff, which is about 34. Pulmonary and renal, it's about 35. Cardio is about 24. Reproductive and endo, it's going to be about 31. So you could see a solid breakdown of all the different questions you could expect on a low and a high range, and also an average for step one. And so when you're looking at this, you want to look at, when we're talking about UWorld or AMBOSS or even USMLE RX, what question bank is going to give you the most for the most questions to better prepare you for the most high yield stuff that will happen on step. And this is just raw numbers. And so if we just focus on UWorld for a second and we focus on cardio is expected to have about 9% on average on your exam, which represents about 24 questions out of 280 questions. And so for that 24 questions, you have a pool of 422 questions to prepare for 24 questions on that exam, right? But we can look at MSK and Derm, and there are about 274 questions in UWorld to better prepare you for 10% of the exam, which is 27 questions. And if we take that a step further, because I'm big on communications and the social sciences, and so social sciences is about 8% of the exam, which amounts to 21 questions. That's about 3 questions less than cardio, right? And so you have a total of 116 questions to prepare you for 21 questions. There's only so many things they could ask you. And so in my mind, I would put more of my money towards that 116 questions to prepare for 8% of the exam than 422 questions to prepare for 9% of an exam. Because you could afford to miss 9% if the return on it is that you have to invest so much into those questions, 422 questions. It's a lot. And more importantly, since general principles is such a high yield thing, almost 40 questions, right? 14% of that exam. You can devote 246 questions. That is a very good return on your investment, especially compared to cardio or pulmonary and renal, which combined, cardio, pulmonary, and renal only make up about 24% of your exam. If that, maybe 22, but that is almost 1,000 questions for 22% of the exam, right? Whereas 14% of the exam for general principles, you could expect to get about 39 questions. And that, to prepare for that, it's only 246, right? So most questions, most high yield. And then here is a good breakdown of the AMBOSS, USMLE, and the UWorld question breakdowns. A lot of them are heavily based on certain strengths that they have. And so you can look at the charts to say, if you really need help with general principles and you haven't chosen a question bank yet, then maybe you should consider USMLE RX, because they have 16% of their question bank is all general principles. There's a lot of overlap between AMBOSS and UWorld, but for the most part, you have some options to choose from. So how to use practice questions. Practice questions are often a gold standard, especially with UWorld. Me personally, UWorld is often considered one of the gold standards when it comes to question banks for step one. AMBOSS and USMLE RX, depending on the school that you go to, they're also pretty good as well. But for me, the questions in UWorld are challenging and the explanations are thorough. However, simply doing questions isn't enough. You need to use your question banks strategically to maximize its effectiveness. So here's how to get the most out of the practice question. Focus on high yield areas first. Start with the most high yield sections, which typically include general principles such as biochemistry, genetics, immunology, cell and molecular biology, also just regular biochemistry. And those are like metabolism, enzymes, hormones, and deficiencies. Then biostats and communications. Those are the social sciences, so ethics and patient interactions. And then pharmacology, so drug mechanisms of action and adverse effects. These areas form the foundations of your step one knowledge, and mastering them early on will give you a strong start. Avoid mixed random blocks. Although many people recommend doing random mixed blocks of 40 questions, I found that this method is very inefficient. Step one isn't evenly distributed across topics. So you're more likely to waste time on less represented subjects like renal and pulmonary. Instead, focus on 5 to 10 question blocks targeting high yield topics in specific areas you're weak in, and do a total of 80 to 100 questions of those. Use tutor mode for learning. Always start doing questions in tutor mode. This allows you to learn as you go rather than waiting until the end of the block to review your answers. After each question, whether you got it right or wrong, ask yourself, if I got it right, what information did I know that allowed me to get the answer correctly? If I got it wrong, what information did I need to know to get the answer right in less than 90 seconds? Write down the answer to both questions and add them to your crib sheet for later review. This active engagement will help reinforce concepts and prevent passive reading. Use practice questions for test taking skills, not just content review. Step 1 isn't just about knowing the material, it's about knowing how to take the exam and using the material in it. Practice exams are the best tools for practicing this skill. As you go through questions, focus on time management. Practice answering questions within 90 seconds. Pattern recognition. Identify key clinical patterns, especially in common diseases. And process of elimination. Practice ruling out incorrect answers to improve your test taking efficiency. Even if you don't know the answer, you can narrow it down to 2, and then it's a 50-50 chance. Review and create crib sheets. After completing each practice question block, review the answers thoroughly and create crib sheets summarizing the key concepts from questions that you got wrong. Write down 1 to 2 sentences that answer what piece of information was necessary to get the question right in less than 90 seconds, and why did I get it wrong? What's the key takeaway from this? These crib sheets will become your go-to review material, especially in the final weeks leading up to the exam. At the end of every day, you shouldn't know what you need to study because you have a whole list of things that you already know you need to study. You wrote it down. How to answer questions. Practice questions often contain a lot of irrelevant information or fluff that can be distracting. It's easy to get lost in these details, but it's critical to sift through the noise. I noticed this both while I was doing tons of practice questions and during my actual exam. The key is to focus on the core question. After reading it, pause for a couple of seconds to think critically about what they're actually asking you. This will help clarify the question and make it easier to eliminate the incorrect answers. Answering the question effectively is all about building a systematic process to it. It may not feel intuitive at first, but with regular practice, doing 80 to 100 questions a day, this approach will become second nature to you, like no time. This method saves time and reduces confusion, which is crucial on test day. If you come across a particularly tough question and don't know the answer, you can still use the process of elimination to narrow down to 1 or 2 choices. This strategy increases your odds by selecting the correct answer 1 out of 2 times, as opposed to guessing from all the options that you have, which drops your odds to at least 25%. You don't want that. 50-50 or nothing. Here's a streamlined approach that I use for tackling practice questions efficiently. Start with the last sentence of the passage. This is usually where the actual question is posed. Highlight the key question to avoid distractions from unnecessary details, allowing you to focus on what is being asked visually. If you already have an idea of what it's asking, skip straight to the answer choices and make your selection. If the question isn't clear yet, go back to the second to last sentence and gather more clues. If you're still unsure, now you can read the entire passage from the beginning, but stay focused on the clues directly relevant to answering the question. Nothing else. Now that you have a strategy in place, it's time to start practicing questions using this method. With repetition, you'll feel more confident in navigating even the most challenging of questions under time pressures. So let's have a practice question. We will start off slow with this first question. So we'll just read the passage. A 62-year-old man presents to the emergency department with severe, crushing chest pain radiating to his left arm and jaw. He is diaphoretic and anxious. His medical history includes hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and smoking. An electrocardiogram shows ST segment elevation in leads 2, 3, and AVF. The patient is immediately treated with aspirin, oxygen, nitroglycerin, and a thrombolytic agent. 6 hours after the onset of symptoms, the patient suddenly develops hypotension, jugular vein distension, and clear lung auscultations. Despite resuscitation efforts, the patient dies. Autopsy reveals a ruptured free wall of the left ventricle. Which of the following is most likely responsible for the patient's death? Now that you've read the passage, take a moment to mentally rephrase the actual question that they're asking. Focus on the specific question posed in the last line and restate it clearly in your mind. The literal question that they asked in this vignette is on the last line. Which of the following is most likely responsible for the patient's death? But what are they actually asking you? So let's revisit the passage and highlight the pertinent information, right? So we have a 62-year-old man. He has crushing chest pain radiating to his left arm and jaw. There's ST segment elevation in leads 2, 3, and AVF. Autopsy reveals a ruptured free wall of the left ventricle and was the most likely responsible thing. A helpful exercise is to restate the question in your own words, making it as clear and straightforward as possible. This will help you focus on answering it concisely and accurately. We know that we have a 62-year-old man with crushing chest pain radiating to his left arm and jaw, ST segment elevations in multiple leads, and a free wall rupture to the left ventricle. who seemed to have died 6 hours later. With that information, the passage is asking, what caused all of this? You could simplify the question to a 62-year-old man, chest pain, and ST segment elevation in multiple leads. 6 hours later, he died. What was the cause? By breaking down all of that information, we've stripped away the fluff and condensed the passage into a clear and concise one-sentence summary. This sharp focus sets us up for success because we know exactly what we're looking for in the answer choices, making the process much easier and more efficient. In actuality, the question in the passage is asking, what caused the person to die 6 hours later after having a heart attack? Or essentially, what caused the heart attack symptoms? Now let's actually look at the answer choices. We have A, neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium. B, coagulative necrosis of the myocardial tissue. C, fibrinoid necrosis of small coronary vessels. D, chronic inflammation and fibrosis of the myocardial wall. And E, lipid-laden macrophages in atherosclerotic plaques. Go ahead and pick from one of the answers. How to review a question. Now that you've selected an answer, it's time to review it by looking at the correct option. Since we're just getting started, the focus isn't about getting the question right. Instead, the goal is to nail down the process. If you get the process right, the correct answer will always follow. But if you don't understand how you got to the right answer, you're leaving it up to the luck gods. And trust me, they're not usually in your corner, especially when the pressure is high in step 1. Relying on luck for 280 questions is like throwing up a prayer. And at some point, your luck's going to run out. So let's work on the technique. So the correct answer is A, neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium. It's often weakening the myocardial wall and leading to the risk of rupture. Now that we've chosen our answer, whether you knew it or not, here's what you need to understand. Signs of myocardial infarctions, or one of its causes, is neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium. All the other answer choices don't accurately describe what's happening during a heart attack. This is a prime example of what I've emphasized before. Often, the passage will describe something specific without explicitly naming it. The answer choices will throw in distractions, but there's always one answer that aligns with what the passage is truly saying. Your job is to match what the passage is suggesting with the answer choice that is correct. So essentially, both the passage and the right answer choice are saying the same thing in a different way. It's your task to recognize the connection. Think of it as A equals B equals C, where A is the passage's reference, B is the definition you're forming in your head, and C is the answer choice that is correct. You're simply matching those ideas together. That's it. That's step 1. Now that you have the correct answer, what's next? This is where you dive into the crucial part. Reviewing the question and creating your content review crib sheet. Typically, when you're using UWorld or Amboss or any other question bank, you'll be in tutor mode so that after you answer your question, you can immediately review it. This method works well because you don't want to answer 80 questions at once and then you have to go back and review them all at the end when everything is just a blur. Instead, taking your time with each question, getting the reps in, but making sure each rep is the best it can be. Once you answer a question, take time to review it. If you had no idea what the question was asking, this is when you dive into the explanations. The detailed breakdowns they provide is often exactly what you need to understand the concept of the question and how to answer it correctly. This process is more effective than just rote memorization or skimming through resources like First Aid or Pathoma, because you're applying what you're reading directly to the questions on hand. Nothing against the other things, but this isn't medical school. We just need to get through this exam. So trim the fat. Instead of wasting time on innocuous facts that don't have any immediate relevance to you, this approach allows you to focus on the most pertinent information and understand its application. You already know where to start, since you've seen the context of the questions and have a solid explanation to work from. Once you've read through the explanation and the educational objective, grab a piece of paper and start building out your crib sheets. The crib sheet should become your go-to for content review, but now it's targeted towards what's actually being asked on the exam rather than generic facts that you have to find a way to infer. You know exactly what you need to work on. and you have an opportunity to work on it directly from your own writing and your own words. How to create a content review crib sheet. So with your pen and paper in hand, your goal is now to write 1 to 2 lines answering this essential question. What information did I need to know to get the question right in under 90 seconds? The key is to keep it clear and concise. This isn't about rewriting the whole explanation or overloading yourself with extra details. It's about capturing the core insight that helped you solve the problem. What truly mattered for getting the question actually correct. Why are you writing this by hand rather than copying, pasting, or typing? It's all about kinesthetic learning. The physical act of writing helps you retain information more effectively. Plus, you're practicing how to break down complex information into simple, actionable steps that will actually be useful to you on the test. This process sharpens your second and third level reasoning, which is crucial for understanding not just the facts, but also why they matter and how to apply them. So, for this particular question, ask yourself, what was the passage really asking me? What was the key information or concept I needed to know? And how to eliminate wrong answer choices. By answering those questions in a few simple lines, you're solidifying that knowledge in a way that you'll remember, and you can use that again when similar questions come up. Now, for this question, we know that the question was asking, what causes a patient to have heart attack symptoms and eventually die of free wall rupture? The answer is neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium. Therefore, I would write neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium leads to heart attack. Free wall rupture can lead to death after 6 hours. After going through all the information in the explanation, you realize that to get to the right answer, all you needed to know was the connection between ST elevation, symptoms of a heart attack, and the idea that free wall rupture causes death after 6 hours. From there, the only answer that makes sense is neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium, because that is a hallmark of a heart attack. The other answers simply just don't fit. Once you have this key insight, you jot it down on your crib sheet and you move on to the next question, applying the same approach and methodology. Typically, you do this for every question you get wrong so you can direct your content review effectively. This process is also helpful for jotting down tumor markers, mechanisms of actions of drugs, or other concepts that you're uncertain about. By building out your crib sheets, you're creating a personalized content review system that is directly relevant to your specific knowledge gaps. As you go through your questions, this is where you'll focus your study efforts. Each note you write down serves as a key to filling in those gaps and committing the information to memory. At the end of the day, you should have a strategic list of concepts to work on. And since you've done all the hard work of reading the explanations and educational objectives, this focus review will help you solidify that knowledge. The goal is to commit these concepts to memory so that when you are faced with a similar question, you'll never get it wrong again. So remember, UWorld, if we're using question banks as an example, specifically, gives you thousands of practice questions for a 280 question exam. So there's no need to go beyond that or risk burning yourself out. The goal is to pass the exam, not ace it. If you're consistently scoring at or above the passing mark around 62%, you're on the right track. Once you've hit that target, you can focus on moving forward to the next challenge in your medical education. How to write a clinical clue. Since step 1 is heavily focused on clinical presentations, it's important for you to train your brain to recognize patterns in clinical clues that will help you identify the correct answer. Many of the passages you'll encounter on step 1 are designed around clinical vignettes that give you a roadmap to a specific diagnosis or disease process. Instead of thinking about the questions in isolation, you can use a systematic approach where certain clues, A plus B plus C, will almost always point to a specific condition we'll use as D. But in some cases, the clues may change slightly, A plus E plus F, leading to a different outcome, Z. Since I'm an analytical person, I like to approach these questions as if they are additive. If you're given a specific component, symptom, a test result, a patient history, those will naturally lead to an answer. Step 1 doesn't try to trick you, but it can mislead you with unnecessary details. This is similar to how a lot of resources in medical education operate. They overload you with information that isn't always useful for answering questions. And that's just what it is. The key to success is learning how to navigate the clinical clues presented in the passage. Once you do that, You'll be able to sift through misleading information and focus on what matters to find the right answer. So, just like we practice restating the question and creating our 90-second crib sheet explanations, we can also add a section for clinical clues to the majority of our clinical vignettes. So what is a clinical clue? A clinical clue is a piece of information that leads you towards a particular diagnosis or answer. These clues are often based on specific patterns that are consistent across cases, such as a set of symptoms or a particular lab finding. By training yourself to recognize these, you'll be able to predict where the question is headed as you read through the passage. How to use clinical clues in practice. Start adding clinical clues to your crib sheets and eventually use them to create Anki cards. This will help you reinforce your understanding of how clinical vignettes point towards certain diseases. As you practice, you'll start recognizing these patterns more quickly and be able to draw connections between the clues and the passage and the answer choices. For example, if you see a vignette with symptoms like chest pain radiating to the left arm and ST segment elevation on ECGs, the clinical clue points towards a myocardial infarction. When you build this into your study routine, they will serve as mental shortcuts that make answering questions more efficient. Eventually, the clinical clues will become automatic, allowing you to navigate clinical presentations with ease and get to the correct answer faster. So think about it. If we're training for the exam and the exam is centered around clinical vignettes, and all the clinical vignettes are going to give you clinical clues, then studying clinical clues every single day is preparing for the exam. You're training for the exam. Just like if you're running track, it's probably good to run every day. And more importantly, if you're a sprinter, it's probably good to do sprints. Same concept. So going back to our previous clinical vignette, a 62-year-old man presents to the emergency department with severe crusting chest pain radiating to his left arm and jaw. He is diaphoretic and anxious. His medical history includes hypertension, hyperlipidemia, and smoking. An electrocardiogram shows ST segment elevation and leads to 3 in AVF. The patient is immediately treated with aspirin, oxygen, nitroglycerin, and thrombolytic agents. 6 hours later, the patient suddenly develops hypotension, jugular venous dissension, and clear lungs on auscultation. Despite resuscitation efforts, the patient dies. Autopsy reveals a ruptured free wall of the left ventricle. Which of the following is most likely responsible for the patient's death? Our clinical clue would be 62-year-old male or an adult, crushing chest pain plus ST segment elevation equals myocardial infarction from neutrophilic infiltration and enzymatic digestion of the myocardium. Or 62-year-old male with the myocardial infarction, death after 6 hours, that equals free wall rupture of left ventricle. In this section, you'll notice that I've developed multiple clinical clues, as there are several key details in the passage that are important to recognize immediately. These clues serve as mental markers, helping me quickly identify certain conditions to diagnose as I read through the vignette. While they aren't full clinical vignettes themselves, these clues act as navigational tools, guiding me through the passage and allowing me to orient my thought process in a way that is helpful for efficiently tackling each of these questions and expand my knowledge base over time. Clinical clues are not full explanations or comprehensive diagnosis. Instead, they're quick references to help steer you in the right direction. For instance, if I come across a phrase like pleuritic chest pain and recent travel, I would immediately start thinking about pulmonary embolism. By focusing on the clinical clues as I read, I'm able to navigate the vignette more efficiently, identifying the most relevant information and ignoring the extraneous details. How to use clinical clues in a passage. As you encounter these clues while reading through the questions, they serve to narrow down your thought process to a few possible diagnoses or answers. Think of them as shortcuts for your brain, triggering associations with diseases and conditions you've previously studied. This not only speeds up your decision-making process, but also improves your accuracy by anchoring your thoughts in what is the most relevant to the question being asked. You're treating this like a funnel where you have all this information and certain clues will help you narrow down immediately. Building clinical clues for each vignette. When you see certain phrases or lab results in a passage, your mind should instantly go to a handful of possible conditions. For example, fever, night sweats, and weight loss. Think tuberculosis or lymphoma. ST segment elevation on ECG. Think myocardial infarction. Recent antibiotic use, followed by diarrhea. You're probably thinking C. diff. Over time, As you work through practice questions, you'll develop a catalog of these clinical clues, which will help you orient in a very structured way. This helps you build your knowledge base strategically, and eventually, you won't need to pause and think. You'll see the clues, recall the conditions, and match the answer choices. By practicing this approach regularly, you're preparing yourself to not only work through the vignettes quickly, but also to make confident, accurate decisions. You'll be training your brain to focus on the most relevant information as you build your diagnostic skills, ensuring you're ready for those challenging clinical vignettes on step 1. Now that you have a solid understanding, the goal is to apply the methodology we've discussed. Simplify the question. Read the last sentence first, break down the vignette to identify what's actually being asked, focus on the key components, and make the question clear, concise, and to the point in your mind. Answer the question. Choose your answer by matching the clues in the passage to the correct answer choice, using your knowledge and process of elimination. Review your answer. After selecting your answer, review whether it was correct or incorrect. Regardless of the outcome, figure out what the specific information was necessary to get the question right in 90 seconds. And then create a crib sheet. Add any useful facts or concepts to your crib sheet, including the clinical clues that you can use to review later. This will consolidate the information and ensures that you'll have a quick reference to look back on when you encounter similar questions. Take your time with each question, but make sure you're honing in on the key points and focusing on the process. The aim here is to develop the habit of breaking down questions systematically. So by the time you reach your exam, this approach should become second nature. Now let's tackle some practice problems. So some content areas to focus on for USMLE Step 1. And these are the priorities that I personally did. I focused my studying on UWorld, but this progression can be applied to other question banks as well. So before I did anything, I did a first pass of mixed blocks of all the subjects, especially the general principles ones. And so I started off with biochemistry and general principles. Then I did my genetics, my microbiology, my pathology, my pharmacology. And then using all the subjects, having those selected, I chose all the biochem questions, which is about 156 questions. And I just focused on those. Then I moved down to all my genetics. So doing 106 of those. Then I moved down to my histology, which was a good 29. And then I did all the biostats questions. Then I did all the immunology questions. And then I did all the embryology questions, and then all the behavioral science questions and social science questions, and mainly just the communications ones, because I wanted to focus on communications in general. Then from there, I did all the behavioral psych questions, which is 179. Then from there, I did all the miscellaneous multi-systems, which is about 23. And then I did all the dermatology questions, because dermatology is a big one on STEP as well. And then I did mixed blocks of all the subjects for reproductive, which is the female reproductive and the breast, as well as the male reproductive. And I spent most of my time for the first week just cranking out all the questions I possibly could in the above sections that I mentioned. I wanted to get a good grasp of what was expected of me for the actual exam. The purpose of this was to get the exposure to the concepts in the context that would be tested, not to test whether I knew it or not, but whether I've seen any of it before. This isn't to test you, it is to train you for the test. So think of this as getting your reps in. So suggested blocks for doing questions. After I finished a first pass of all the questions I've mentioned, and also taking a practice exam to see where I actually am at, I proceeded to create blocks of questions based on the suggested content area distributions from the NBME and from my gaps. I spent most of the time in the high yield, low question count area first. And so, no, just like focus on question-based questions with specific intentions based on the official NBME breakdown, right? And so I mentioned never do 40 question mixed blocks because that does not help you, right? What you can do is between 10 and 20 questions for each block and the priorities. And so if we're using UWorld as an example, I would select for the subjects, I would select either all the subjects or just pathology, and I would do all the general principles and the multi-systems as one block. And I'm only doing 10 to 20 questions for that. Then for the second block, I'm doing the 4 Ps, so pathology, pathophysiology, physiology, and pharmacology. And I'm doing that for endocrine, reproductive, hematology, oncology, and neuro. Then for my third block, I'm doing the behavioral sciences subject, and I'm using psychiatric behavior and social sciences without communications. So you don't want to select communications in this block. And in the fourth block, I'm selecting all the subjects, and I'm doing biostats and communications only. So only communications and biostats. For my fifth block, I'm selecting biochemistry, immunology, histology, pathology, physiology, and pathophysiology. as the subjects. And then I want to choose my systems being biochemistry, immunology, and cell biology. And that's block 5. Then block 6, we're going back to the 4 Ps. And I'm doing cardiology, renal, pulmonary, and GI. For block 7, I'm doing genetics, microbiology, embryology, and anatomy for my subjects. And I'm selecting all the systems. And that's going to be block 7. And finally, block 8, I'm selecting the subjects of biochemistry, pharmacology, physiology, and microbiology. And I'm selecting all the systems. And those are my first 8 blocks that I would do. And after a couple weeks of that, then I may switch it up. And so if we're talking about phase 2, where we've gone through phase 1, which is our first pass of stuff, then phase 2 would be those blocks that I suggested. Then we're moving into phase 3. And those suggested blocks are actually the blocks that I recommend doing after I took the exam the second time and passed it. And so if I were to refine my blocks, this is what I would do. And typically this is what I would do in phase 3. So weeks 5 and 6 of our study plan. And so block 1, I select all the subjects and I do general principles and multi-systems as well as the poisonings. Block 2, I'm doing the 4 Ps and I'm doing cardiology, renal, and pulmonary. Block 3, I'm doing 4 Ps as well. I'm doing GI, endocrine, and reproductive, both male and female, as well as pregnancy. Block 4, I'm doing all the subjects, and I'm selecting neuro, hematology, oncology, and rheumatology for the systems. Block 5, I'm only selecting the behavioral sciences subject, and I'm doing all the psychiatric and behavioral sciences, as well as social sciences without communication. Block 6, I'm selecting all the subjects, and I'm only doing the biostats and communications. Block 7, I'm selecting subjects microbiology and histology, and I'm doing all the systems. And in block 8, I'm selecting only biochemistry and immunology for the subjects, and I'm doing all the systems. So this is a more fine-tuned version of the blocks, and there are some overlap, but there's also some very specific focuses on the higher yield content areas based on the percentage breakdown for the MBMEs. And so the content areas that I would do maybe 2 to 3 times after taking my exam, if I were to do it again, would be all the general principles. So all the general principles questions, all the multi-systems questions, all the dermatology questions, all the social sciences, communications questions, all the reproductive, male, female, childbirth, pregnancy questions, and then doing all the biochem questions for all the systems, doing all the immunology questions for all the systems, doing all the genetics questions for all the systems, doing all the biostatistics questions for all the systems, and also doing all the histology questions for all the systems. If you just need to drill out some questions, I would focus on doing those 2 to 3 times before going into my exam if I were to do it again, because I felt those are the ones, particularly in UWorld, those are the ones that really showed up for me. And they're reflective of the actual content breakdown. And so if you know those like the back of your hand, you should be really good. How to use Anki. So Anki is an excellent tool for spaced repetition and rapid recall of high yield facts, but it can quickly become overwhelmingly ineffective if not used correctly. So here's how to get the most out of Anki. Focus on quick recognition and not long explanations. Anki is about rapid recall, not reasoning. So focus on being able to answer each card in 10 to 12 seconds. If you find yourself spending longer time on a card, the information is either too complex for Anki or the card is poorly designed. So it requires a little bit of reflection on your part. Stick to straightforward facts, such as drug mechanisms. What is the mechanism of drug X? Interleukins and clinical markers. What is IL-2 associated with? What does CD4 represent? And enzyme deficiencies. What deficiency causes disease X? The goal is to quickly recognize stuff under pressure, similar to what you'll need on the exam day anyway. So again, you're training for the exam. Prioritize high yield topics. Focus your Anki deck on high yield subjects that are frequently tested. Clinical presentations, such as match diseases to the classic patient demographics and presentations, drug mechanisms and side effects. Anki is especially useful for just drilling pharmacology. Drugs, right? Histology and biochemistry. Quick visual recognition of key patterns. You see a slide, know what the heck that slide does. By focusing on high yield material, you won't waste time on obscure facts that are just unlikely to appear on step 1. Again, it's only 280 questions. Use spaced repetition to your advantage. Anki's strength is its spaced repetition algorithm. That's why everybody uses it. It mixes and spreads out the cards and organizes and all that stuff. It does it. That's what it's for, right? Make that work for you. Stick to your daily review routine and let Anki schedule your cards for you. The more consistently you use it, the more the algorithm will reinforce those concepts you're struggling with while reducing time spent on material that you've already mastered. This big one is make your own cards based off of what you need. One of the biggest advantages of Anki is the ability to create your own cards. While third-party decks can be useful, I found that making my own cards significantly improves my retention and understanding of the material. When you create your own cards, you are forced to reinforce what you already know, making the cards help you internalize the key concepts that are relevant to you personally. And then focus on what you actually need to know. Instead of being overwhelmed by someone else's deck full of obscure or irrelevant facts to you, you can prioritize the material that is most important for your learning and exam strategy. I will say, put an asterisk there. There's certain things that you just need to know. And by virtue of this whole step 1000 thing, I actually made that stuff for you. So it's the stuff that I used, and it's really basic stuff of just like, what is this mechanism of action? If you don't know it, you better know it, right? And so instead of having to make that stuff, you can focus on the stuff that is more tailored to you, and you could just drill the stuff that I used. Using third-party decks can be helpful, but I often found that those decks just contain too many innocuous or overly detailed facts that weren't essential for exam preparation. So by creating my own cards, I made sure I was focusing on material that I needed to know to review in a way that was directly relevant to my performance. One of the big things is building over time, right? So limit the number of cards you do. Don't overload yourself with 2,000 new cards at once. Set a realistic goal of reviewing 500 to 1,000 cards a day, depending on how comfortable you are with the material. Any more than that can lead to burnout and reduce your retention rate. So just keep your daily card load manageable and avoid overwhelming yourself, but also try to be as consistent as possible. And then integrate Anki with your practice questions. Anki works best when you integrate it with your practice questions. After you complete a practice question block, add any facts you missed or struggle with to your Anki deck as clinical clues and crib sheets. This way, you can reinforce the key concepts that you want to take away from your practice questions with your daily review. And this is just going to be constantly reinforced with all the other things that you're doing, with your handwritten notes and everything else. Because the goal is to create as many opportunities for you to get a lot of repetitions in a variety of different ways. And then you just rinse and repeat. How to combine practice questions and Anki for maximum efficiency. So the goal of this resource is to help you use tools you already have in the most efficient way possible, so you don't get overwhelmed by the process of studying. This isn't just about saving time in the short term, but about optimizing your overall study efficiency. It's a workflow. If you can save even an hour a day by the end of the week, that adds up. Time you can dedicate to other important things like your hobbies or personal well-being. The key question is, how do you take your notes and convert them into effective tools for active recall? And how can you save time by staying productive? Through my experience, I found that using automated tools such as ChatGPT, along with built-in features in Anki for batch imports and content creation, makes the process smooth and significantly more efficient. It's all about working smarter, not harder. And this resource will guide you on how to actually do that. Converting your review notes to Anki cards. So referring back to the previous section where we worked through our practice questions, right? We developed a crib sheet, a 90-second information blurb, and a few clinical clues. Now, I'm going to walk you through how I batch create all of this information into Anki cards without having to manually create each one. Instead, I use an automated process built right into the Anki platform. This way, you can efficiently turn your notes into powerful active recall tools without spending hours making cards one by one. I'll show you how to streamline the process so that all the essential points, clinical clues, and quick review notes you've collected can be converted into Anki cards that reinforce your knowledge and save time. So we have our crib sheet, 90-second information. MSH2 is associated with mismatched gene repair. A mutation leads to Lynch syndrome. Our clinical clue, 45-year-old female plus family history of colon cancer plus multiple adenomatous polyps plus MSH2 gene mutation equals Lynch syndrome. Also, mismatched DNA gene mutation equals Lynch syndrome, MSH2, MLH1. First thing I'm going to do is to take all the clinical clues and crib sheets we've created and place them into a text document or a Word document. Once everything is compiled, the next is to reformat the crib sheets and clues so that they're ready for conversion into Anki cards. To do this, I make sure that the card formatting is consistent across each line or section I want as a card. This includes dividing the text into 2 sections, the question or prompt, what you'll be actually quizzed on, and the actual answer, the information that you need to recall. By structuring your document this way, it will be pretty easy to import everything in one go, which is pretty good. It saves time and allows you for batch creation of your Anki cards. So you can make 100 cards in a matter of seconds. Now let's go through the process of ensuring this format works seamlessly when you upload it into Anki for quick, efficient studying. An example would be, my crib sheet is MSH2 is associated with mismatched gene repair. A mutation leads to Lynch syndrome. So front of card 1 would be associated with mismatched gene repair. And the back of the card would be MSH2 gene for Lynch syndrome. The front of card 2 would be MSH2 mutation can cause, and the back of the card 2 would be Lynch syndrome. And so in the text document, I would have associated with mismatched gene repair, a semicolon, and then MSH2 gene Lynch syndrome. The second line would be MSH2 mutation can cause, I have a semicolon, and then Lynch syndrome. So in this example, you'll see how to create 2 different cards from a single text document. Each line in the text document corresponds to a different flashcard, with the front and the back separated by a colon. The information before the semicolon represents the front of the card, or the question or the prompt, while the information after the semicolon represents the back of the card, which is the answer or the explanation. When you format the text document like this, Anki recognizes each line as a separate card. The key is to make sure that each card has only 1 semicolon per line, ensuring the correct distinction between the front and the back of the card. For example, clinical clue, ST elevation and chest pain, semicolon, associated with myocardial infarction. And for a crib sheet, neutrophilic infiltration and myocardial enzymatic digestion, semicolon, hallmarks of myocardial infarction. These 2 lines create 2 separate Anki cards, each with a front and a back. The semicolon acts as a signal for Anki to split the information between the question and the answer. And an important note is that each line should only have 1 semicolon. If your original crib sheets or clinical clues use semicolons, replace them with any other character to avoid confusing the Anki import process. And then line separation matters. Each new card must start on a new line. So ensure you press enter after each card. Also, make sure that each card only has 1 line's worth of stuff. So if there is a separation or a paragraph in your card, you need to remove that. So let's try this with clinical clues that we've created earlier. Add them to the text document following this format. And once you're done, we're going to import the document into Anki to automatically generate our flashcards. This process will significantly streamline your study sessions by turning your notes into active recall tools with minimal effort. So after that, you want to save your document as a text document. After reformatting all your clinical clues and cribs using the semicolon method, doesn't really work with .docx or any of those. Just save it as a text document, nothing fancy. And then you're going to choose your deck or create a new specific one for these clinical clue cards that you're going to create in Anki. Batch creating Anki cards based on notes. Here's a brief walkthrough of how to actually batch create your Anki cards based on your notes, right? Once we have Anki open, we want to go to File and Import. This will open a file explorer where you can select the text file that you just created that you have already formatted. And then from there, on the next screen, we're going to make sure to set the field separator to semicolon. That way it recognizes the semicolons that we actually created. This ensures that everything before the semicolon will be mapped to the front of the card and everything after will be mapped to the back of the card. The table preview will show how each row is split into 2 columns, with each row representing a card. After that, you're going to go to the import options and you're going to choose note type as basic. Make sure to select the deck where the cards will actually go. And it's easier to create decks based on these themes such as pharmacology, clinical presentations, or topics that you struggled with in exams, or specific exams that you've taken, or block numbers that you've done. This way, your Anki decks can stay organized. In the field mapping section, you want to double check that column 1 is mapped to the front of the card and column 2 is mapped to the back of the card. And after ensuring everything is in place, click Import at the top right of the screen, and this will generate all your flashcards based on your formatted text, saving you significant amounts of time, and you can get right into your active recall now. And once everything is imported, you'll be ready to focus on practicing with these newly created cards. This method is definitely ideal for converting your clinical clues, your crib sheets, or detailed notes into efficient study tools with minimal effort whatsoever. In terms of Step 1000 resources that I provide to you guys, we have the clinical charts, which are high-yield charts that have multiple markers for clinical markers such as interleukins, histology associations, mechanisms of action, CD markers, all that. Those are your charts. Then you have your Anki 1000 Anki deck, which has all of your clinical charts and mechanisms that are must-know information. Anything you have in your charts is in the Anki deck. And this includes all the information in the charts for rapid fire form. And so think of the clinical charts and the Anki deck as two sides of the same coin. Then we have our crib sheets. Those are written notes based on your practice questions where you have information that you need to know to get the question right in 90 seconds. No more, no less. I provided examples of mine, so all the ones that I have, but I encourage you to create your own as well. And you definitely should, because you'll be doing practice questions a lot. And then you have your clinical clues, which are written notes based on the trends in clinical presentations that are must-know information. And typically that may coincide with your crib sheets as well. And so having both of those, you have a lot to work with. My suggestion is to get the most out of all the resources, use the following strategy. In the morning, start with 1 to 2 hours of reviewing your crib sheets from the previous day's questions, clinical clues, and Step 1000 clinical charts. Be in a constant state of leisurely reading during this time because you want to manage your stress and also not stress yourself out, right? So if you get used to it, the more you get used to it, the more it becomes second nature. And so when you can see them on the exam, you know how to navigate it. It's not shocking. And then midday, complete 80 questions in whatever question bank that you choose, and definitely do it in tutor mode and adding new facts to your crib sheets and clinical clues as needed. This usually takes about 3 to 4 hours for me. And so use it sparingly, but don't do more than 4 hours of doing questions. It's not worth it because there's other stuff that you could do. In the afternoon, I would suggest spending 1 to 2 hours on your Anki 1000 deck. So focusing on active recall from your crib sheets and your clinical charts and your clues, reviewing the stuff that you did in the morning and the night before, right? So this is a moment for you to just focus on building those recall muscles. And then in the evening, you want to review your crib sheets from that day for about 1 to 2 hours before wrapping up the day. It's pretty much the exact same information that you reviewed in this period will be the first stuff that you'll be reviewing first thing in the morning. But this stuff is also pertinent to the stuff that you actually saw in your questions as well. So you already saw in your questions, and then you're seeing it a couple hours later in your crib sheet review before you go to bed. And then you're going to see that same stuff the next morning, first thing in the morning. And so this approach allows you to blend fact recall with application practice, creating a balance of steady routine that reinforces both your knowledge and your test taking ability, right? And it's not fancy and it does get boring, but we want to pass this exam and we want to be very prepared. So have at it. And so now let's trim the fat. You don't have a lot of time to waste. So your practice exam questions, your question banks aren't just for reading, they're for playing the game. Don't treat them like it's a bedtime story. It's there to teach you how to answer the questions, not to make you a textbook scholar. Focus on learning how to read a question stem, spot the clues, and take it down like it owes you money. Anki equals flashcard boxing gym. This isn't a place for essays. It's for reps. Short, snappy cards. See the prompt, say the answer, move on, 10 seconds per card max. Stop babysitting the pre-made decks. Yeah, they're pretty, but guess what? 80% of that stuff is just fluff. It's not going to make you better. So make your own cards. You remember what you write because your brain does the heavy lifting when you make it. So make it work for you. Crib sheets are your golden goose. Write down only what you need to get a question right. No fluff, no dissertation, none of that stuff. You're here to remember how to win the fight, not to rehearse a history lesson. If you want to teach, pass your exam first. Questions build test-taking muscles, not the other way around. UWorld or any other question bank isn't your teacher, it's your sparring partner. The more rounds you go, the better you dodge, weave, and knock out wrong answers. So just take advantage of it. And also, avoid overloading your plate. Don't try to hit 2,000 cards a day. Don't try to do 160 practice questions a day. This ain't a sprint. It's a marathon. Stay consistent, don't burn out. If you burn out, you're not working towards training for an exam. You're just wandering aimlessly. We don't want that. In this next chapter, we'll tackle the art of practice exams, how to choose the right ones, what to watch out for, and how to interpret your scores without losing your mind in the process. So stay sharp. Bottom line, if question banks like UWorld are your coach, Anki's your gym, and crib sheets are your playbook, then you're stepping into that exam ready to dominate. So stick to the plan, don't overthink it, and remember, every day's a fight. So train smart, not just hard. Because when the lights turn on, we don't have time for you to be messing around. It's time to get after it. It's time to get that money. Chapter 8, taking practice exams the right way. Practice exams may seem like one of the best ways to gauge your readiness for step 1, but they simply aren't. One of the reasons why is because the content distribution for most practice exams don't align with the content distribution for step 1. As a result, they are not as reliable of a metric as assessing readiness for step 1. It's just what it is. Yet, you can't afford not to take a practice exam because there can be some valuable insights from your experience. Therefore, they need to be used strategically. This chapter explains how to schedule your practice exams, analyze your performance, and adjust your study plan based on your test results. I also share tips for building endurance for the long exam day. So what you can expect from this chapter, understanding the role of practice exams, how the NBME practice exams and also the UWorld self-assessments are used to simulate step 1, how to interpret your scores by learning how to analyze your performance, identify weak areas, and understand the significance of your test results in relation to your progress, approach scheduling strategically, when to take a practice exam, how often, and how to use them as checkpoints throughout your dedicated study period. Reviewing mistakes, why reviewing wrong answers is as important, if not more, than getting the right answer, and how to convert mistakes into learning opportunities. And lastly, building stamina for the test day. Practice exams not only test your knowledge, but also help you develop mental and physical endurance needed for the actual step 1 exam. Why practice exams matter. Taking practice exams is one of the most important parts of step 1 preparation. Not only do they provide a snapshot of your current knowledge, but they also simulate the actual exam experience with an asterisk. If used correctly, practice exams can help you refine your test-taking strategy, build endurance, and identify weak areas that need more attention. However, there's a right and wrong way to use practice exams. Simply taking one isn't enough. You need to approach them strategically to get the most benefit. Choosing the right practice exams for you. There are several options when it comes to practice exams, but not all practice exams are created equal. Here's how I rank the most useful practice exams for step 1 prep. My main one is UWorld self-assessments. These are probably the closest in format and question style to the real step 1 exam. After taking it twice, I definitely have a lot of experience with step 1 in particular. UWorld's interface and questions are similar to what you could actually see on test day, and making these practice exams ideal for refining your skills is very much needed. And so UWorld self-assessments are the top one for me. Then we have our NBME forms, and those are the forms 25 through 31 at this point. I think they have about 7 or 8 of them. While they're not as representative in terms of the testing interface, there's 50 questions across 4 blocks. So you get 200 questions, but there's 50 questions across 4 blocks. And so it's not reflective of the 40 question style blocks that you're going to get on the actual exam. The NBME is still an essential, valuable thing because they provide a good benchmark for where you stand. Since NBME creates the actual step 1 exam, these exams will help you gauge your readiness. I will say that it is still the second on my list, and mainly because the interface is a lot better on UWorld than it is on the NBME. And most of the NBME exam questions are retired board questions, and so they're not ones that are actually going to be used. Third on the list is the AMBOSS self-assessment. And this one is an annual event that's offered by AMBOSS that gives you an opportunity to assess your step 1 readiness for free. The AMBOSS self-assessment week includes a full-length exam with a detailed analysis of your performance. While it's a solid option to get familiar with clinical reasoning, AMBOSS generally doesn't mimic the interface of the real exam as closely as UWorld does. However, It provides high quality questions that challenge your clinical knowledge, and the results analysis can help pinpoint areas you need to improve on. Keep in mind that while the content coverage is good, it's not as representative of the biostats and communications heavy nature of Step 1 as it is today. And that can be said for the MBMEs as well. USMLE RX is another solid practice tool that offers a full set of Step 1 questions designed to correlate with first aid and USMLE Step 1. The key strength of USMLE RX is its heavy integration with first aid, which helps refine key concepts while testing your knowledge. However, the interface and the question style may not be as reflective of the real Step 1 exam compared to UWorld or MBME. And so this is a good supplement resource for solidifying foundational knowledge, but for exam simulation, it just doesn't quite match the other ones that I mentioned. And then lastly, the free 120s. The official 120 question sample test that USMLE offers every single year. It's a short full-length exam. It's about 3 blocks, but highly representative of the content style that you'll take for that year. And so if you're taking the free 120 from the previous year, it probably won't be as reflective of this year's content, but it's a good gauge. And so if you need some practice, you could use these. The only caveat is that it doesn't allow for you to review the questions. And so you have to do well with finding a third-party resource to help you review the questions that you missed. When to take a practice exam. It's important to space out your practice exams in a way that allows you to measure progress without burning out. Here's the general schedule that I would recommend. We're going to start our test preparation with the practice exam early, probably the first couple of days, right? Ideally, you want to take your first full length during the first week of your dedicated study. This will give you a good baseline score and a sense of where you stand, and also just to get your feet wet in terms of the interface and everything. Then you're going to start taking one every 2 to 3 weeks. After your initial exam, schedule a practice exam every 2 to 3 weeks. This gives you enough time to improve based on your previous performance without overwhelming yourself with constant studying and testing. And to put that into context, right? Phase 1, you start off with the practice exam, day 1. From there, you spend 2 weeks focusing on the first pass of the left side of UWorld. Then you take a practice exam after that. Then you move on to phase 2, which is doing your 80 question blocks. And the goal is to try to get a level of consistency with that 80 question blocks and getting your review done. And after that, you take another practice exam. Then in phase 3, you're working on fine tuning everything. And after that, you take another practice exam. And then once you get into phase 4, then that's where you're starting to take a practice exam less than 2 weeks apart. And so in your final weeks before your exam, during the last 2 weeks, I would recommend taking at least 1 to 2 practice exams to fine tune your strategy. These should be used to assess your readiness, identify any lingering areas that are weak, and building confidence. What I wouldn't recommend is you taking a practice exam more than once a week. And mainly because, say you take a practice exam and you have total 7 days, right? You have a total 7 days. You take a practice exam day 1. Then it takes maybe 1 or 2 days to review it. So you're down to 3 days. And so you only have 4 days left in 7 days. You already know that one of those days is going to be a half day that allows you to just review and you're not doing any practice questions, right? So now you have 4 days down that you can't do practice questions. That leaves you with only 3 days to implement any of the stuff that you are actually trying to fine tune or practice or try to apply into your actual studying. It only gives you 3 days before you try to do another practice exam. Give yourself a little more time. You want to extend that out. And so you could do that with 7 days, but you want to make sure you give yourself a good 3 to 4 days of applying the things that you need to work on into your study regimen. Going back-to-back practice exams without having the opportunity to review and actually put that into practice doesn't do you any good. It's kind of a waste of time. And you're kind of just burning through practice exams, and they can be pretty expensive sometimes. So don't do that to yourself. How to analyze your test results. Taking a practice exam is only half the battle. You need to spend just as much time analyzing your performance to get the most out of the value. So here's how I would recommend breaking down your test results. Focus on areas, not just the overall score. So categories, systems. While your overall score is important, pay close attention to how you performed in specific system categories. Did you perform poorly in biochem, but excel in anatomy? Use this information to guide your study plan moving forward. Identify patterns in wrong answers. So look for patterns in the questions you missed. Were they mostly due to a knowledge gap, misinterpretation of the question, or a timing issue? Understanding why you got the question wrong will help you tailor your review and practice more effectively. And then obviously we're going to target our weaknesses, right? Based on your analysis, refocus your study efforts on the areas where you're consistently underperforming. This might mean creating more focused question blocks in UWorld or adding specific Anki cards for reinforcement. Again, we want to reiterate the clinical clues, the crib sheets, those are your holy grail. So if these gaps are not on those, you better put those on those and you commit those to memory. Building endurance. Step 1 isn't just a mental test. It's a physical and emotional test. The exam lasts about 8 hours and you'll be answering 280 questions in total. One of the key benefits of practice exams is that they help you build the endurance necessary to get through the real test without losing focus or energy. Last thing you need is to be hungry, tired, lethargic. You don't need that during the exam. You could enjoy all the rest you want after you take the exam and you get through it. And so here's how practice exams can help you build that endurance. It helps you simulate exam conditions. When you take a practice exam, do them under exam conditions that mirror the actual exam. Sit down for the full duration, take breaks according to the rules, limit distractions, and also start the same time you are going to start during your exam, right? So if the exam starts at 8 o'clock, you should be in that seat ready to go on your practice exam day at 8 o'clock. This will help you get used to the mental and physical demands of the test, right? It shouldn't be a surprise on test day because you practiced weeks and weeks and weeks leading up to that. Pace yourself. One of the most important aspects of step 1 is the time management. Practice pacing yourself by sticking to the 60-minute time limit for each block and managing your breaks carefully. Give yourself X amount of time, so a total of 45 minutes of break time for this should be plenty. Train your brain for stamina. Just like training for a marathon, gradually build your stamina up by practicing with full-length exams rather than just individual question blocks. This will help you maintain focus and prevent fatigue on test day. And that's one of the big things. If you're ready to go and you have a lot of energy and you have enough in your tank to get through the exam and more, you're doing something right. When it comes to your practice exams, don't chase a perfect score. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of achieving a high score on your practice exams, but it's important to remember that step 1 is a pass-fail exam. Your goal is to pass, not achieve perfection. And here's why. Passing is all that matters. You don't get brownie points for anything more. Step 1, because it's pass-fail, is so focused on getting the knowledge and skills you need to cross the pass line threshold. But overworking yourself in pursuit of this is counterproductive, especially because it can lead to burnout. Again, this is physically, emotionally, socially draining you. It's mentally draining. Thinking about it just makes me exhausted, right? And so don't let this dictate your life. Use practice exams for learning, not validation. The purpose of practice exams is to help you identify weak areas and improve, not validate your knowledge. A low score on a practice exam is an opportunity to adjust your approach, fill in the gaps before, and literally grow from it. If you're not using practice exams as a tool versus a test, then you're doing something wrong. Assessing practice exam relevance for step 1. This is a big one. While practice exams are valuable for building endurance and testing your knowledge, they can be misleading. After taking every available NBME, 25 through 31, all the UWorld self-assessments as well, plus sitting for step 1 twice, I realized that the question distribution on practice exams doesn't necessarily match the real thing. And that's where people get caught up. They'll pass a practice exam, but then when they take the real thing, they're like, this is not what I studied for. What the heck? Right? And so from that experience and also talking to other people, I realized that there's something a little off here. And so if we look at the step 1 question breakdown by system, and this is from the actual NBME distribution for 2024, we see that human development has an average of 2%, which out of 280 questions is going to be 6. Heme Onc, 11% average, translates to about 29 questions. Behavioral and neuro, about 12%. So 34 questions. MSK Derm, 10%, so 27 questions. Cardio is about 9%, so about 24 questions. Renal and pulmonary, not renal or pulmonary, but renal and pulmonary together, make up about 13% of the exam. And so that's about 35 questions. GI is about 8%, so 21 questions. Reproductive and endocrine is 11%, so about 31 questions. Multisystem is 14%, so that's 38 questions. Biostats is about 5%, so you could expect 13 questions on that. Social sciences, so like communications, those are about 8%, so it's about 21 questions. General principles is, which they've since gotten rid of and they dissipated it across all the different systems, but general principles is about 14%, and so, about 39 questions, right? And the official question breakdown by discipline, so if we're looking at about 280 questions and the percentages of those, for pathology, it's about 48%, and that's about 134 questions, so it's a big chunk. Physiology is about 30%, and so we could expect about 84 questions out of 280. Biochem, 19%, so about 53 questions of biochem. Pharmacology, 19% as well, and so about 52 questions. Anatomy and embryology combined is about 13%, and so 36 questions. Same thing with micro. Micro is about 13%, and we could get about 35 questions. The behavioral sciences, it's about 11%, and so we could expect about 29 questions on that. Histology and cell biology, it's about 11%, and so we could expect about 29 questions as well. Immunology, 9%, so 24 questions. And genetics, 7%, about 20 questions. And so this is the step 1 exam as the NBME has published. So an average of all the questions, a low range, a high range in terms of percentage out of 80, and then a estimate of what you could expect on any given step 1 exam. Again, it's a range, but for the most part, this is the exam. And so we have a little chart here that just allows us to see what these are going to look like, right? And so it's heavy on general principles, and it's heavy on behavioral health. It's heavy on multi-systems. It's heavy on, renal and pulm, but individually renal and pulmonary are about half that, right? One of the things that sneaks up on you is how heavy communications is. It's just as much as GI, and it's almost just as much as cardio. So in terms of UWorld practice exams, the question analysis based off of 160 questions, we're just going to look at the raw numbers, right? So looking at the UWorld self-assessments 1, 2, and 3, and comparing that to what we could expect on step 1. And so each one of the adjusted numbers for step 1 that we can predict is going to be out of 160 instead of 280. And so if we look at this, human development, it's new. And so they don't really have a section for that in UWorld yet. But for step 1, out of 160 questions, we could expect in HemOnc, we could expect at least 17 questions on average. UWorld self-assessment 1, you could get about 18. UWorld 2, you get about 11. And UWorld 3, you get about 13, right? So UWorld 1 is probably the most reflective of what you could expect in terms of HemOnc. Behavioral health, on STEP, you could expect about 19. And UWorld 1, you get about 22. UWorld 2, you get about 26. UWorld 3, you get about 17, right? On MSK, on the real thing, you could expect about 15 out of 160. And so the one that fits closest to that is UWorld 2, with UWorld 1 getting 17, UWorld 2 getting 15, and UWorld 3 getting 14. Cardio, you could expect about 14 questions. And so UWorld 1, you get about 9. UWorld 2, you get about 20. UWorld 3, you get about 15, right? Pulmonary and renal, expect 20 on the exam. You get about 22 in UWorld 1, 15 in UWorld 2, and then 19 in UWorld 3. In GI, you can expect about 12 on the real thing. So 14 on UWorld 1, 12 in UWorld 2, 11 in UWorld 3. Endo and repro, you could expect about 18. We get 26 on UWorld 1, 27 on UWorld 2, and 27 on UWorld 3. Multisystems, you could expect about 20, but they since changed things a little bit. So UWorlds aren't really reflective of like multisystems specifically. Biostats, you could expect about 7. This is where it gets really interesting because biostats is becoming more representative, and also communications. They're becoming a lot more representative. And so you could expect to get about 7, when we're adjusting it, right? And so UWorld 1, you only get 4. UWorld 2, you only get 2. UWorld 3, you get 7. So that's probably the most reflective. But UWorld 3 came out not too long ago. And the same thing can be said about the social sciences. UWorld 1, you get 1. UWorld 2, you get 0. In UWorld 3, you get 12. And on the real thing, you could expect 12. So this is probably the most representative. And then general principles, you could expect about 22. In UWorld 1, you get about 25. UWorld 2, you get about 30. In UWorld 3, you get about 23, which is pretty good. And so my personal opinion, UWorld 3 is probably the most reflective of what you could actually see in terms of content distribution. And so this is more of an accurate measurement compared to the other ones, and mainly because of the representation of general principles, communications, and biostats. When it comes to MBME practice exams, we could break down our analysis off of 200 questions instead of 280. But technically, if you really think about it, there's only going to be 200 scored questions out of the 280. And so the MBME practice exams are really just how many questions you could expect to get scored in terms of a raw score. So I guess it is a decent predictor in terms of like raw numbers, how many you need to get right to pass. But the content distribution is so off that it can be misleading, really misleading. If we're looking at the content analysis of the MBME practice exams from 25 to 31, we could actually look at it out of an adjusted score for step 1 of what you could expect based off of that percentage. And this is an average percentage, right? So instead of out of 280 questions, we have it out of 200 questions. So we don't have anything for human development, so it's not reflective of that. But HEMONC, we could expect about 21 questions. And so each one of the MBMEs, we will get 20 questions. In terms of behavioral and neuro, across the board, you get about 22 to 24 questions for the most part. MSK and Derm, you could expect about 19 questions, and you will get around 17 or 18, mainly 18, a little bit like 17 for 31. Cardio, you can expect about 17 questions, and you'll get 16 on the practice exams for MBMEs. Pulmonary, you can expect about 25, and about 22 to 23 questions will appear on each one of the MBMEs. DI, you could expect about 15, and you will get 14 on the practice exams. Endo and Repro, you could expect about 22, and about 24 to 25 will be on the practice exams. Multisystems, you could expect about 27, but you will only get 17 on the practice exams. Biostats, you could expect about 9, and you'll get about 10 to 11 on the practice exams. Social sciences, you could expect about 15, but you'll only get about 5 to 6 on MBMEs 25 through 30, with 9 on 31. And then general principles, you could expect about 28 on the actual thing, and you'll get about 28 on the actual practice exams. And so the big differences is the multi-systems and the communications. Those are really off. And if you're not used to seeing so many communications questions, that could be a make or break. From my experience, the most recent exams, MBME 31 and UWorld Self-Assessment 3, are the closest to the actual exam. Why? Because they include a much larger portion of communications questions and multi-system questions, which makes up a significant chunk of the actual exam compared to older exams. Older practice exams, in contrast, often overrepresent other topics, which can give you a false sense of, what's actually being emphasized on the current step 1 exam. Because every year they change it incrementally. And so if they're making incremental changes, but the practice exams are old, then over time, you're just going to see a large discrepancy in what is actually reflected on the exam. And that's just what happens. It's not intentional. It's not like jarring, but it's very subtle, and those changes just add up over time. If you compare the question breakdowns on these newer practice exams to the USMLE content distribution, like the official one, they align more closely with what you can expect on test day. Older forms don't reflect the same balance of topics, so relying heavily on these older ones can skew your preparation, and essentially they can be misleading. Always keep the official content breakdown in mind, and be aware that not all practice exams will be an accurate reflection of your step 1 experience when you actually take it. Adjusting your study plan based on practice exam schedules. The beauty of practice exams is that they provide you concrete data you can use to tweak your study plan. Here's how to adjust your study schedule after each exam. After each practice exam, review your weakest categories and focus your study sessions on those areas. For example, if you're just trash at biostats, prioritize it and spend that next week doing biostats every single day until you feel a little bit more comfortable with it. You kind of have to eat the crow. Just get through it, get over it, and build from there. Refine your question blocks. So instead of just doing random question sets, tailor your UWorld or your AMBOSS to focus on the weakest areas, but don't overdo it. If you miss a lot of questions in pharmacology, do a decent amount of pharmacology stuff every single day. Don't just do 100 questions one day and then not touch it. Focus on doing questions every single day and just make it just part of your regular routine now. And then increase review of challenging topics. The name of the game is just reviewing stuff. The more you can review, the less likely you're going to forget it. And so if a certain category consistently just drags your score down, just add an extra Anki card there or add some more to your crib sheets to reinforce that knowledge in that area. Use the feedback from your exams to guide your review sessions. If you are almost there, then make sure you're there. And if you weren't even close, then make sure you at least have a path towards knowing where to go when you see that question, style, or type again. Now let's trim the fat. So let's break it down. Practice exams aren't just for kicks. Every 2 to 3 weeks you could take one, but not every week, at least starting out. And especially not every day. You're building a strategy here. So, we're not auditioning for burnout. Don't do that. We don't have time for that. Don't freak out over scores. You're aiming to pass, not win a gold medal. You use the exams to figure out what you don't know and then fill in those gaps. And that's all part of this game. Go deep on mistakes. Got something wrong? Cool. That's a clue, not a failure. That's where you're going to spend your time. So dig into why and use it to sharpen your sword. Instead of doing content review on everything, just focus on the things that you actually just didn't get right or that you're not good with. Train for the main event. Put in practice like it's fight night. Sit down, no distractions, no snacks, crush it one go at a time. Build that endurance so you're not wiped out by block 6 or 7 on game day. And if you can do that, you're doing something right. Passing is winning. Step 1 isn't about perfection. You need to get a 63 to 64% on the exam to actually pass, right? It's a challenge, but you only need to get that. So once you hit that passing mark, it's all gravy for you. You can build from there. Don't overthink it. Get over the line, then move on. And bottom line, practice exams are just dress rehearsal. It's not the real thing. So use them to find your weak spots, tighten up your strategy, and get ready to deliver on that game day. Don't overdo it because quality is better than quantity. You're here to pass, not burn out chasing a perfect score. Because once you get to clinicals, they don't care as long as you pass because everybody has to pass. So next, we'll talk about you. Self-care isn't a luxury. It's necessary. We'll cover how to balance your study schedule with recovery so you don't break down crying from burnout before your exam. So stay tuned and we'll get after it. Chapter 9, self-care during dedicated. Your physical and mental health are just important as your study schedule. In this chapter, I discuss the role of sleep, nutrition, exercise, and mindfulness during your dedicated study period. You'll learn how to build a self-care routine that supports your study and helps you avoid burnout. And so what you could expect is practical strategies for prioritizing sleep, hydration, and balanced meals, techniques like daily mantras and meditation to manage your stress and anxiety, how to stay connected with family and friends while setting boundaries for your study time, and more. The importance of self-care. Studying for step 1 can feel all-consuming. With so much at stake, it's easy to fall into the trap of studying 12 hours a day, neglecting sleep, and letting your mental and physical health fall by the wayside. But the truth is, if you do not take care of yourself during your dedicated study period, you will risk burning out before you even hit the exam day. Self-care isn't just about feeling good. It's about optimizing your performance. When you're physically and mentally well, your ability to retain information, focus on for long periods of time, and handle your stress during step on a day-to-day basis significantly improves. And there's so much data that supports that. But one of the things that goes first during dedicated is all those things I just mentioned. In this chapter, we'll discuss how to build a self-care routine that supports your study efforts and helps you stay consistent throughout the dedicated without losing your mind. Because if you lose your mind, you ain't getting nobody. So let's talk about sleep. One of the most common mistakes students make during dedicated is sacrificing sleep for more study time. That's a big mistake. Sleep is essential for memory consolidation, problem solving, and cognitive function. All the things you need to perform well in step 1 is really predicated on getting sleep. You don't get sleep, you can't do those things, and then you're not going to do well. That's just what it is. So, memory consolidation, right? Sleep helps you solidify the material you've studied during the day. Without adequate rest, your brain does not have the resources or time it needs to process and store that information for long-term use. Cognitive performance. Studies show that sleep deprivation impairs focus, decision-making, and the ability to process complex information. Exactly the things you need to get through these clinical vignettes on STEP. And so how much sleep do you actually need? How much is enough? Aim for about 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night, especially during those most intense study days. Create a bedtime routine that helps you wind down and stick to it. If possible, try to go to bed and wake up at the same times every day. And if you can't sleep for 7 to 8 hours, just plan on carving out time to just be in your bed for that amount of time. You don't need to be on your feet. All that stuff could wait till tomorrow or later. It's like if you're going to study hard, you got to rest hard too. That's just what it is. Use daily mantras and meditation. Step 1 is as much of a mental challenge as it is an academic one. Anxiety, stress, self-doubt, they could just creep in, especially during the exam day and as the exam day approaches. I tell you, week of the exam, a couple of days before the exam, anxiety is through the roof. But it doesn't have to be detrimental. That's why it's important to have a consistent strategy in place for how you manage your mental health. You don't want to get caught slipping. That's just what it is. One technique that worked well for me was just starting each day with the personal mantra and incorporating some meditation routines throughout the day. And so this is what I did. I had a daily mantra, and each morning I would spend about a few minutes saying just a mantra that I created myself to center myself, set a positive tone for the day, and you could choose whatever resonates with you. But the goal is to reinforce positive thinking and build confidence. If you don't hear anything good from anybody else, at least you heard it from yourself. And that's something that you can bank on. And you can control that too. And if you need to do that 2 or 3 times a day, be my guest. And then I have a midday meditation. So around 3:30 every day, I just told my Alexa, rain, sleet, or snow, give me a notification at 3:30 p.m. every single day and tell me to do a 10-minute to 15-minute meditation session. I used the same audio track. I used the same time. I was in the same spot. It was like clockwork. And this allowed me to reset myself mentally, reduce my stress, and refocus for the rest of the day. You can use guided meditation apps, breathing exercises, or simply just sit in silence and focus on your breathing. But at the end of the day, that's something that you could depend on. Just like you could depend on studying that day, you could depend on brushing your teeth, you could depend on eating, you could depend on going to sleep, you could also depend on that daily meditation. These practices may seem small, but they help you stay grounded. They help you manage anxiety, and they help you maintain a healthy mindset throughout this tumultuous period that is dedicated. Stay hydrated and eat nutritious meals. I know we're on medical school and all that stuff, but some things need to just be said because some of y'all be tripping, right? Your brain is an organ, and like any organ, it needs fuel, especially to function at its best. What you eat and what you drink has a direct impact on your energy level, your focus, and your cognitive performance. And so in terms of hydration, make it a habit of drinking water consistently throughout the day. You could drink all this other stuff. With regards to alcohol, probably want to stay away from that as well. Dehydration can lead to fatigue, headaches, and poor concentration. So carry a water bottle, aim for 2 to 3 liters of water, or 6 to 8 cups of water, but don't neglect the water. And if you don't like water, put some Pedialyte packages or, water down some Gatorade or, add some flavoring to it. Don't overdo it, but get your water up. Nutrition, focus on eating balanced meals that include all the stuff. Protein, healthy fats, complex carbs. Avoid sugary snacks and energy drinks as much as you can because they could just spike and just crash your energy levels. Instead, opting for nuts and seeds and berries and leafy greens, right? Like dedicated. You have nothing else to do but study. And while you're studying, you can invest in all the other things that improve your studying ability. And then timing, right? Try to eat at the same times each day and help to regulate your metabolism and energy level. These are things that we all know to be true that you can control. And the better you do that, the better your gut health is going to be. And the better your gut health, the more your cognitive function is going to be as well. So keeping a consistent meal schedule is also something that allows you to avoid hunger-induced distractions and, help you get through these study sessions. So just eat smart and then take structured breaks. Studying 10 to 12 hours a day can lead to just diminishing returns if you don't give your brain time to rest, right? So regular breaks help you recharge. They help you maintain your focus, especially for the long haul. And so what I normally like to do is give myself, a set period of time of studying. So if the exam is 8 hours or 9 hours, I'm only going to study for 8 or 9 hours, or maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 10. But the goal is to break things down so that I get stuff done during those 10 hours. And then I can enjoy myself, right? And I do that through a Pomodoro method. And so Pomodoro breaks, right? Use the Pomodoro method to break down your study time into manageable chunks. You don't have to carve everything out in an hour. You have 8 to 10 hours a day to do it, right? So, for example, study for 45 minutes, take a 15-minute break, repeat that for 8 cycles. And after that, you're done. This will help you prevent mental fatigue and keep you focused during the study sessions. But more importantly, it allows for you to also live life. In addition to short Pomodoro breaks, you could schedule a longer break in the middle for lunch, maybe take a 30 to 60 minute, step away from the desk, go for a walk, do something you enjoy. This will help you reset your mind and reduce the burnout as well, right? Engaging in hobbies and exercise. Just because you're in dedicated study mode doesn't mean you need to give up everything you enjoy. In fact, engaging in hobbies and regular exercise can help you improve your overall well-being and help you perform better academically. And so if doing push-ups is going to help you get a better score, hey, I would try that out. So exercise, right? Physical activities that boost your blood flow to your brain. It increases your energy level. It reduces your stress. That's physiologically what happens, right? We all know this. So just try to aim for at least 30 minutes of exercise a couple of times a week. Get some fresh air. Just go out and enjoy yourself and go for a run, right? This can be anything from a brisk walk to a full-on workout. Whatever helps you move and clear your mind, put that at the top of the list. Same thing can be said about hobbies. Set aside time each day to engage in something that you love, whether it's reading comics, playing music, watching a show. Having something to look forward to outside of studying will keep you balanced and prevent you from feeling isolated and also prevent procrastination, right? Think of it as like you put in the work during your study time, and then after you get off work, you get to enjoy yourself. And you can always plan for that before, during, and after your study. Again, we want to maintain social connections. Dedicated, especially for STEP, can feel very isolating because people are so used to working together, and then once dedicated starts, people can't be found, right? And it's really important to just like maintain all these connections with your friends, your family, or even your study partners. Studying together is also a good thing. Social interactions help reduce stress, and they also give you a sense of support and purpose, especially during this intense period. But you also want to set boundaries. So while it's important to maintain relationships, it's also equally important to let everybody know that you have only so much capacity to do stuff. And so while you'll be studying intensely for these months, you value their support, but they can't be all over you. So communicate your availability clearly to avoid these distractions, but also let people know that you haven't fallen off the face of the earth. And then in terms of study groups, if you thrive in group settings, consider joining a small study group. Reviewing material with others can definitely reinforce those concepts and offer a sense of camaraderie. And also it's good to bounce ideas off of people because you get insights from just regular conversations. So just be sure to choose study partners that you're able to focus with and commit with, just like you're doing. But it's also finding a balance. You don't need to always study with groups, but there's an opportunity and there's a value in studying with groups if you don't do that already. Any little thing that helps you get past this exam in one piece is worth a try. Protect your peace. Embarking on this journey is undoubtedly one of the most stressful experiences you will face in your medical school journey, especially within the first 2 years. Many physicians who've gone through it all will tell you the same thing. It's one of the hardest times, the most challenging times, and there's no words to fully prepare you for what it's like actually doing in reality. The impact of this process may have on you, both in the short term and the long term, can be really significant. That's why it's crucial for you to approach this with intention, care, and sustainability in mind. If you don't, you'll get caught slipping. You must recognize that you're not only investing in your future as a healthcare professional, but also in you as a person. Balancing this journey in a way that doesn't leave you burned out or jaded is essential, because entering your clinical years exhausted and disillusioned will undoubtedly negatively impact your relationships with medicine and with other people, your peers, your colleagues, so on and so forth. So, it's important to find ways to make this process sustainable and fulfilling. It's not just about grinding for a test score, but about nourishing your life along the way. This is the perfect time to prioritize yourself, explore your personal growth outside of medicine, whether it's improving flexibility, picking up a new hobby, diving deeper into anything old. These activities can help provide much needed balance for you, and it can be fulfilling. If you've always wanted to read more books, learn a new skill, commit to self-improvement, now is the time. These positive outlets will not only help you manage stress, but also provide healthy coping mechanisms before it becomes overwhelming. In my own experience, treating extracurricular activities as therapeutic outlets made a world of difference for me. I committed to sleep therapy, ensuring I got 7 to 8 hours of rest each night. I would always begin my day with comic therapy, with spending about an hour reading from a long list of comics that I've always wanted to finish. As an artist, I gave myself art therapy, dedicating an hour to just sketching, brainstorming comic ideas, and exploring character designs that have been just living in my head, but I never had the opportunity to materialize because of the demands of medical school, right? Music therapy became another outlet for me as well. After my cousin and my godbrother, who was a music producer, passed away, I decided to honor his memory by learning how to play music on his old instruments. Instead of letting it be donated, I took it as sort of a way to keep his legacy going. And these outlets didn't just help me manage stress. They helped me find a joy and maintain a balance during an otherwise difficult time. The reality is, dedicated study for step 1 is going to be stressful. You'll face frustrations, especially with seemingly endless practice questions, and the feeling of being stuck in a cycle of mistakes and forgetfulness. But the key is to protect your peace. Find outlets that build you up, not break you down. Whether it's through creative pursuits, hobbies, or personal interests, these activities will help you stay grounded. Keep your perspective and emerge from this experience not just a better test taker, but as a stronger, more well-rounded version of yourself. Ultimately, the journey of dedicated study is not just about surviving the stress, but thriving despite of it. Your success will reflect in more than just your test scores. It will show you a different outlook on life in general, your ability to cope with challenges, and the confidence you carry as you continue through medical school and beyond. Let's trim the fat. Sleep is non-negotiable. Think you can pull an all-nighter and still perform? Wrong. 7 to 8 hours of sleep is the secret weapon for memory retention and staying sharp. So rest is recovery. Fueling the machine right. Hydration isn't just for marathon runners. It's for you too. Balance your meals, avoid sugar crashes, and keep your energy steady. Brain food, not junk food. And hold on to energy drinks. Mind over matter. Start each day with a mantra like, I've got this. Sprinkle in some meditation to keep that mental game on point, because stress can't break you down if you don't let it. Work hard, break hard. You're not a robot. Use Pomodoro sessions. Grind hard and then rest hard. Step away, breathe, then come back ready to roll. Don't forget to move the body. Physical activity isn't just for good health. It clears your head, whether you're hitting the gym or taking a walk. It's therapy in motion. And then keep your people close, but not too close. Stay connected to your friends and family. Just make sure they know when it's grind time, it's grind time. And when it's hang time, it's hang time. Boundaries matter. Your brain is a machine, and machines need maintenance, but you're not a robot. Sleep, eat, hydrate, move, and repeat. If you're running on fumes, you're setting yourself up to crash, and we don't need that. Treat self-care like part of that study plan. It's just as important as any question block or clue sheet or review sheet or Anki deck that you have. So treat it that way. Chapter 10, Debunking Common Myths about Step 1. There's a lot of misinformation out there about Step 1, and this chapter sets the record straight. What I'll do is I'll debunk some common myths, like the idea that you need to study more than 12 hours a day or finish 100% of UWorld to pass. You'll learn what really matters in your preparation and how to avoid falling into common traps. So, in this What to Expect, a breakdown of the most common misconceptions about Step 1, why it's important to study smart, not hard, and how to prioritize high-yield strategies for studying and avoid unnecessary stress that's not going to help you at all. The world of Step 1 preparation is filled with advice, resources, and strategies, some of which can be overwhelming or misleading. Whether from your peers, online forums, third-party companies, people like me, you'll likely come across a bunch of various myths that may lead you down the wrong path if you don't know how to approach them critically. So myth 1, you need to master every subject. One of the most persistent myths is the idea that you need to master every single subject on the Step 1 outline to pass Step 1. While it's true that Step 1 covers a broad range of topics, it's more important to focus on mastering high-yield content than trying to learn everything. And there really isn't like a thing as like high-yield content. It's just stuff that you will likely get tested on. The reality is, Step 1 emphasizes application over rote memorization. You don't need to know every detail of every subject, but you do need to know how to apply key concepts to clinical scenarios. Focus on mastering high-yield areas like biochemistry, pharmacology, biostats, and general principles. These areas form the backbone on every exam and will give you the most return for your investment. So what do? You do what we talked about. You use practice exams, you use question blocks, you identify your strong points and your weak areas, you allocate more time to mastering the weak areas, and just don't get bogged down in trying to learn obscure facts, right? Just put it into the formula that we talked about with our crib sheets and our Anki decks and our clinical clues, and apply that with your practice questions and just rinse and repeat every day. Myth 2, all study resources are created equal. Many students fall into this trap of believing that all study resources are just equally as helpful. This leads to this temptation that like you need to use everything available. Pathoma, First Aid, Sketchy, Boards and Beyond, Amboss, UWorld, so on and so on. However, not all resources are the same. They aren't as equally effective for everyone. And piling these things on can actually just slow down your progress. And so for me personally, I started to just trim the fat and just use only one or two. The reality is, the value of your resources depends on how well it aligns with your learning style and your needs. Some resources are better than others. So content review, Pathoma for pathology, sure. While others are better for test practice, like UWorld. And so if we're taking a test, you want to practice the test, not review the content. Simply using all these available things just won't be necessary for you because that's not what you need. And it can lead to being confused and overwhelmed because there's only so much time in the day. So what do? Pick a few high quality resources and stick with them. UWorld is great for primary question banks, and Anki and crib sheets are great for review. Supplement with Pathoma or First Aid if you need to, but don't feel like you're obligated to, because everything's just a tool. It's about quality, not quantity. Myth 3, you need to do 100% of UWorld to pass the exam. There's this widespread belief that you must complete every single question on UWorld, often multiple times to pass Step 1. While UWorld is an essential tool, you don't need to finish it 100%. You don't need to see every single question just to succeed, because you're probably not going to see every single question on the exam. The reality is, it's more important for you to focus on understanding the reasoning behind the question, especially the ones you got wrong, and reviewing your weak areas than completing every single question. You won't know what you don't know, but it is also a good thing to know the things that you've seen. Many students waste time just rushing through questions just to hit 100% completion without spending the time of actually reviewing and learning from their mistakes. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you're just bound to repeat them. So what do? You focus on quality over quantity. Aim to complete substantial portion of UWorld, but prioritizing the learning of it based off of the ones you get wrong. It's not about how many you do in a day, it's about how many days you do them. So use your crib sheets, use your Anki to reinforce those concepts, and ensure you truly understand the material rather than just rushing through the question bank just to say that you did it. And me personally, I went through the question bank probably about 3 times. So I knew I did so many questions that I knew when a new question was added to the question bank, and I knew when an old one was being removed, because when they would say new questions to do, it would say 1 because I did them all. And the first time, it didn't help me too much because I didn't pass. I saw improvement, but I didn't pass. And when I changed that approach, that's what made the difference for me. Myth 4, you have to study 12 plus hours a day, every single day. It's easy to assume that the more time you spend studying, the better your chances are at passing STEP. However, overstudying can lead to burnout, reduced retention, and poor mental health, making it harder for you to perform well on an actual exam. And people often just feel stuck. And so you don't want that. The reality is, studying effectively is more important than studying for long hours. You don't get brownie points for clocking in more hours. The brain needs time to rest and recover, especially during intense study periods like dedicated. So working 12 plus hours a day without breaks can lead to just diminished returns in general for anything, where the quality of the studying just decreases drastically because you don't have enough to give. And so what do? Focus on structured study sessions, like a Pomodoro technique. So starting with 45 minutes on, taking a 15-minute break, and maintaining that focus and productivity. Limit your daily study time to 8 to 10 hours, including breaks. So take at least 1 day off per week and try to rest and recover. Myth 5, you should spend weeks on content review before doing practice questions. Many students believe that they should spend the first few weeks of dedicated just reviewing content, right? From resources like First Aid, Pathoma, Sketchy, before even doing practice questions. However, this approach often just leads to just wasted time and a false sense of preparation. The reality is, step 1 is about application, not memorization. You learn how to apply content by doing practice questions, not by passively reading or watching videos. Waiting too long to start UWorld or NBME practice exams can leave you unprepared for the style of questions that you're going to see on the exam. And so the sooner you start, the better off you are. So what do? Start doing practice questions early, even if you don't feel ready. Use tutor mode, especially in UWorld, because it allows you to learn as you go and incorporate content review only when you need to fill in those gaps of knowledge. Practice exams should also be used throughout your dedicated period to gauge your progress and adjust your study plan. These are all tools to help get you to the finish line. And so don't feel like you need to hold off on one thing before you do another thing. You can do all of them at the same time. Myth number 6, the exam will focus mostly on cardio, pulmonary, and renal. It's common to hear that step 1 is heavily weighted towards certain subjects like cardio, pulmonary, renal. While these subjects are important, step 1 covers a broad range of topics, and you can't really rely on these areas to carry you through the exam. The reality is, step 1 tests general principles across multiple organ systems and emphasizes biostats, biochem, communication skills, ethics, and integrating these concepts. Relying too heavily on one subject like cardio, pulmonary, or renal can lead to being unprepared for other high-yield things. And so if you're not thinking about biochemistry, if you're not thinking about neuro, if you're not thinking about general principles, if you're not thinking about histology or pharmacology, you're going to get caught slipping. And so what do? Use the NBME Step 1 official content outline as a guide to ensure you're covering all your major areas and the content distribution that they publish every single year for that year's exams. Make sure your study plan includes a balanced focus of all these subjects across all the different organs, and prioritize general principles and subjects like biochem and communications, because those will get you through the exam in ways that you've never probably seen before. Now it's time to turn the fat. Myth 1, master every subject. Yeah, no. You're not trying to win Jeopardy. Stick to the high yield hitters, general principles, pharmacology, biochem. You'll get Way more bang for your buck if you just do that. Myth 2, use all the resources available. Wrong again. Too many tools will have you drowning in content. UWorld, Anki, use your crib sheets are all the things that you actually need. Keep it simple and keep it sharp. Myth number 3, you need to finish 100% of UWorld. You don't get brownie points for completion. Focus on why you missed the questions and learn from them. It's not about the numbers, it's about the understanding. Myth number 4, studying 16 hours a day will get you through. Let me stop you right there. 8 to 10 hours of focused studying is all you need. Burnout is real, and it'll wreck you if you push it too hard. Myth number 5, skip questions until later. Content review is king. Bad move. Dive into practice questions early and often. Content review is nice, but the real game is learning how to answer questions because that is what STEP actually is. 280 questions over 8 hours. Myth number 6, over-focus on big systems. Nothing against cardio, pulmonary, and renal. They're important, but step 1 covers everything. Balance your time so you don't get blindsided on the test day with things that you are not strong at, like biochem. Bottom line, stop trying to be a hero. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being efficient. Focus on high-yield content, use the right tools, and don't waste time on myths that'll just throw you off track. So keep your eyes on the prize, and let's get past step. Now that we've cut through the noise, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. In the next chapter, I'll break down the final steps of your dedicated preparation, from nailing your last 2 weeks to conquering the exam day like a pro. So let's finish strong. Chapter 11, final preparation and execution for step 1. As exam day approaches, the focus should be shifted from studying new content to refining test-taking strategies and managing your mental health. This chapter covers the final 2 weeks of preparation, what to do the day before the exam, and how to manage time and anxiety on the actual exam day itself. So what to expect here is a way to approach the last 2 weeks of studying for step 1, tips for handling the day before the exam, and what to bring with you, and also strategies for staying calm, managing time, and performing your best on exam day. So your last 2 weeks of dedicated. The final 2 weeks of dedicated are crucial for fine-tuning your preparation and building the confidence you need to walk into the exam ready for success. At this point, focus on your weakest areas. By this point, you should have a clear understanding of which topics are your weakest and your strongest, based on your performance on your practice exams and your daily question blocks. The last 2 weeks are your opportunity to really focus on those gaps. Targeted question blocks that focus on where you're underperforming. This could be pharmacology, biochem, biostats, any of those topics where the performance is lagging. It's time to focus on that stuff so that it's not dragging you back. Review crib sheets. Continue reviewing your crib sheets daily, particularly the topics that you've struggled with. If you missed a question on it, you should have an answer on your crib sheet for that. And these are 1 to 2 sentence summaries, anything you need to know to get the question right in 90 seconds. That mess is invaluable, and allow it to quickly reinforce the knowledge that you already have. And then using the Anki in your high-yield review with your charts and your clinical clues. If you've been using Anki, prioritize reviewing cards from your weakest areas. Also revisit the high-yield charts and the review sheets for subjects like drug mechanisms, clinical markers, and enzyme deficiencies. Take one final practice exam. During the last 2 weeks, it's a good idea to take a final practice exam, preferably a UWorld or an NBME. I would say UWorld 3 or NBME 31 because those are probably the most reflective, and also consider using one of the free 120s for that year. This will help gauge your readiness and build your test-taking endurance. Don't stress if you didn't get a perfect score. Remember, step 1 is pass-fail. If your goal is to consistently score near or above the passing threshold, then you're doing something good. So when to take it? Plan to take your final practice exam about 10 to 12 days before your test date. This gives you some time to review your weak areas without adding too much stress close to the exam. That means that you have some more in the tank to improve without burning out. After the exam, analyze your performance like you've done with all the rest of them, but don't get hung up on your score. Instead, focus on where you can consistently apply your test taking strategies and improve in key areas. Use active review techniques. This final stretch is all about active review. This will help get you to retain information that you studied and keep it fresh. If you don't use it, you will definitely lose it. And so some things that you can help to incorporate are using the teach back technique. One of the best ways to solidify understanding of a topic is to teach it back to yourself or to somebody else. Summarize the key concepts aloud as if you're explaining it to somebody that hasn't seen it or heard it for the first time. This forces you to engage with the material actively, quite literally work with the material, and it helps you identify any gaps in your understanding because you have to rationalize that. You have to sit with it, be with it, and also explain it. Crib sheets and flashcards, right? So we've talked about this a lot, where using your review sheets as crib sheets, using your Anki flashcards actively, focusing on high yield facts that you need to rapidly recall. This technique helps allow you to, set time limits for being able to recall things. And also it allows for you to keep your brain engaged during the review sessions. And then simulate question conditions, right? Do practice questions and try to finish those in 90-second intervals, mimicking the test-taking conditions of the real exam. This will keep you sharp, help you improve your ability, and help you manage time under pressure. The more practice you get at this, the better you're going to be at it, and it'll become second nature to you, to where it actually adds more time to your test-taking allotment. It's important to take care of your mental health and manage your stress. As the day approaches, maintaining your mental health and physical health is essential. You're more likely to perform well if you're rested, hydrated, and you manage your anxiety very well. So stay consistent with sleep. Continue to prioritize getting 7 to 8 hours of rest each night. Your brain needs time to consolidate all the information that you've absorbed during the dedicated period. And sleep is crucial in allowing for that cognitive performance to be boosted. Daily mindfulness and meditation. Continue to tell yourself your daily mantras and have a meditation session at least once a day. 10 to 15 minutes of mindfulness can reduce your stress, and it could go a long way, especially approaching your test. And then exercise and staying hydrated. Keep up with regular exercise, even if it's just a light activity like walking or stretching. I've started stretching a lot, and I really love how it made me feel when I'm sitting down for 8 hours. Staying physically active will help reduce that anxiety and improve your focus, because if you do a lot of push-ups, it's going to drop your cortisol spikes, right? And so make sure that you stay hydrated, especially during long study sessions, because you want to make sure that your body is functioning in the proper ways that it needs to, especially when you're in such a fight or flight response. The day before the exam. The day before the exam can feel probably the most stressful you've ever had, but it's important to keep things as low-key as possible. This isn't the time for cramming. It's a time for relax, clear mind, and make sure you're physically and mentally ready for the big day. So do what you normally do. Wake up at the same times, eat the same foods, have the same schedule, but we're not putting in 10, 12 hours of studying. We're doing our light review. Treat this as a typical day off where we're only doing light review. Spend no more than a couple hours doing your crib sheets, your clinical charts, your Anki review. Don't do any practice questions. The goal is to avoid diving into new material and really just go over the things that you've mastered and that you know to be true to boost your confidence. This is all about boosting your confidence, not about learning something new. Take the afternoon off. After a light review, spend the rest of the day just relaxing. Watch a show, read a book, play a video game, go for a walk. Whatever helps you unwind. Remember, at this point, you've already done all the hard work. And now it's time to just collect on your investment. Preparing for the next day. So gathering all the things that you need for the exam day, right? Your ID, your exam ticket, your snacks, your water, your comfortable shoes, and clothes. Set multiple alarms and plan your route to the test center to minimize any last-minute stressors. If anything, go to the test center if you can. Just see how long it's going to take, because you can't be late. You can't be stressed out. You can't be flustered. This should be a normal walk in the park. You're clocking into work and you're about to put in that work. So exam day strategies. The big day is finally here, right? Step 1 is an important milestone, but you need to keep in mind that it's just one of the parts of your medical journey that you got to go through. There's other parts too. Here's some things that will be very helpful, to help you perform best during the day, right? So stick to your routine. You have your morning mantra, you have your meditation. Start your day with the same mantra and mindfulness routine you've been practicing for weeks on end during dedicated. This will help ground you and reduce any pre-exam jitters that you may have walking into the exam. Eat a healthy breakfast like you've done every single day. Make sure that you eat something that is balanced with protein, carbs, healthy fats. Avoid heavy, greasy foods that will make you feel sluggish. You need to be on your game during that day. Get to the test center early. Arrive with a lot of spare time to spare, and mainly because you want that buffer for traffic and other unexpected delays. Once 8 o'clock hits, you should be on your game. Manage your time and your breaks. Time management is crucial for STEP. You have 280 questions, over 8 hours, and you need to pace yourself to avoid burnout. Skip the tutorial if you can. You're probably already familiar with how the exam format is. Skip that tutorial at the beginning of the exam, mainly because it adds 15 minutes to your break time, which you can actually use later in the day. So instead of having 45 minutes, now you have 60 minutes. Use your breaks wisely. After each block, take a short break, ideally about 5 minutes. Even if you feel okay, just get up, stretch, drink water, use the bathroom, have a light snack. Use the time to reset mentally and physically before you go to the next block. Get up, get back in 5 minutes. Stay hydrated and stay energized. Drink water regularly, but not so much to where you'll need to frequently use the bathroom, because if you have to use the bathroom during an exam or during a block, it's going to cut into your time, and it actually takes a while to get checked in and out of the actual exam center. And so you don't want to deal with that. And if you're trying to hold it, then it's going to distract you from actually focusing on the task at hand. So you definitely don't want to be drinking a lot of water, but stay hydrated. Bring snacks like nuts, granola bars, fruit, anything to maintain your energy throughout the day. And finally, stay calm and focused. Even if you encounter difficult questions or feel like you're struggling for one reason or another, it's important to stay focused and keep moving on. When you click next on a question, you hit the reset button every single time, and you'll be doing that for 280 times. Don't dwell on tough questions. If you come across a question that stumps you, mark it, move on. Spending too much time on a question can hurt your overall time management. And remember, you can always come back to it later if you need to. But it might be an experimental question too, so it's inconsequential. Trust your preparation. You spent months preparing for this day. Trust your instincts and strategy that you've developed over this period of time. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to pass. And more importantly, positive self-talk. Use positive affirmations during the exam. Remind yourself that you are capable and prepared for this exam. A positive mindset can help you stay focused and calm under pressure. You got into medical school. You made it through medical school. You made it through dedicated. Now it's time to cash in on your preparation. Let's trim the fat. This is the home stretch. No fluff, no nonsense. The last 2 weeks, zero in on weak spots and drill them. Take your final practice exam about 10 days before and use that feedback to fine-tune your review. You're polishing the edges, not rebuilding the whole wheel. Don't skimp on your self-care. You need sleep, you need to hydrate, you need to breathe. This isn't the time to become a steady robot. Stay sharp by keeping your mind and body in check. The day before the exam, just keep it chill. You want a light review, but don't cram. Use the day to prepare your snacks, your ID, your logistics. Just get everything ready to go so you're not scrambling the morning of. You're focused. On game day, it's showtime. Managing your time and breaks smartly. Don't get stuck overthinking one question. Trust the hours you put in and keep it moving. You got this. It's just another day in the office. The bottom line is, you didn't put all this work in just to psych yourself out, especially not in the final hours. Trust your prep, step into the testing center ready to take on anything that comes your way. Remember, the goal is to pass, not to be perfect. Walk out there and leave it all on the field, unless you're one of those lucky few that has accommodations where you're spending 2 days taking your exam. Then you need to have more in the tank for the next day. But the final day, you can leave the rest of that on the field. And this is it, the final step in your journey. You've grinded all the way through all the chapters of Step 1000, built your strategies, and refined your approach. Now it's time to put all that into action. Walk into that exam with confidence, crush it, and come out on the other side ready for what's next. A bigger, better, more improved version of yourself. So we're at the conclusion. Trust the process and trust yourself. The journey to Step 1 is unlike any other thing in medical school. It's a test of endurance, knowledge, and mental resilience. Along the way, you've likely faced moments of doubt, burnout, and uncertainty. But remember, those challenges are part of what makes this journey so meaningful. Step 1 is not just about improving how much you know, but also proving how well you can preserve, adapt, and grow under pressure. In Step 1000, we've walked through every step of the process, from my personal struggles and insights to building an efficient study routine, mastering UWorld and Anki, debunking myths, preparing for exam day, and more. The goal of this guide has been to help you prepare for Step 1 in the way that promotes sustainability, consistency, and confidence. You're not just learning about the exam, you're learning about how to manage your time, protect your mental health, and trust in your ability to succeed. Remember the key lessons. Study smart, not hard. Efficiency and targeted learning will take you much further than sheer hours of cramming. Focus on high-yield topics, active recall, and practice questions to sharpen your test-taking skills. Master the test, not the content. Step 1 is an application-based exam, not a content recall exam. Use UWorld in practice exams and other question banks to learn how to think critically under pressure and apply your knowledge to the real-world clinical scenarios. Self-care is non-negotiable. Don't sacrifice your physical and mental well-being for the sake of studying more hours. Sleep, hydration, regular breaks, and stress management are essential for sustaining high-level performance over the long haul. Trust your preparation. The weeks and months you've put into this preparing for Step 1 have built the foundation you need to succeed. Trust your process, trust your strategy, and believe in your ability to cross the finish line in one piece. So moving forward, passing Step 1 is a major milestone, but it's just one of the parts of the journey in medicine that you have to go through. Whether you ace it or simply cross the pass line, remember that the skills you've developed go a long way. Critical thinking, time management, resilience will help serve you throughout your medical career and help with your patient care as well. After Step 1, you'll likely move to a new challenge, which is your clinical rotations, Step 2, and eventually residency. The strategies you've learned through this Step 1000 journey, how to study efficiently, care for your well-being, and stay consistent will be tools you can carry forward. So final thoughts. Your journey is to become a physician, and that's unique. And so is your approach to Step 1. There is no perfect formula for everybody, but by customizing your study plan, maintaining your health, and believing in yourself, you'll eventually find your path to success and you'll be able to claim it as your own. It's okay to have setbacks. I've had my fair share of them. Academic probation, failing STEP, getting rejected from medical schools, all that stuff. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes, right? I failed stuff. I have not succeeded in everything that I've done. But what matters is that you keep moving forward, one step at a time. As long as they allow you to continue going, it's just a matter of time before you be on the other side. The only time that you're not going to continue down this path if they explicitly tell you that you're not able to. You're not allowed to. And so you've done all the hard work. Now it's time to go into that exam room with confidence and give it your best shot. It's time to cash in on your investment. Remember, step 1 is just one of the steps in a much longer journey. Keep pushing forward, and you got this. So best of luck, and I wish you all the best. Thanks for checking this out. This is USMLE Step 1000, created by me, Stephen Christian, a space where you can turn your Step 1 prep into something smarter, sustainable, and stress-free. If you found this helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. You can follow us on Spotify for more study tips and more audio podcast stuff, Instagram at USMLE Step 1000, and you can like the Facebook page to stay connected. Don't forget to download all the resources, all the Anki decks, the clinical clues, everything from the PDFs and everything that you saw in the videos you can find at www.step1000.com. And follow the blog for more updates as well at www.usmlestep1000.com, your one-stop shop for everything Step 1000. And if you like what I'm doing here and you want to follow or at least support, you can check me out on social media at Stuck on an Eyeland. Thanks again, and I look forward to sharing more stuff about Step 1 prep and how to overcome these mental hurdles so that you can have the best possible experience possible. So again, I'm not going to hold you any longer, but remember, let's keep pushing forward one step at a time to 1000.